All right. Hello and welcome. Good afternoon to my friends on the east and central coast of the so-called United States and Canada. And hello to everyone else catching this at a different time zone or on the VOD later. This is another video version of one of my Substack essays where I read the piece out loud to you live on YouTube with the chat participating and sharing their own experiences, and then I log it later on as a VOD for everybody who prefers to get their information in a audio visual format. Hello, how's everybody doing? It is a snowy day here in Chicago. I am loving the smell of the snow and the slight sting on my skin. I'm definitely more of a summer sun worshiper type, but what really bugs me is wet cold. And so once you kind of slip into that wintry, dry cold that stings rather than penetrating your bones, I kind of like it. I've also been playing a lot of Pokemon Go lately, so I've been stepping outside for just a brisk hit of cold air to like spin a little Pokestop or catch a little Pokemon or what have you. So I've been getting a little bit more of just like cold exposure, blood pumping kind of stuff. So it's okay. It's been a good time. Um, all right, we're talking today about the ethics and tactics of telling someone in your life that you think they might be autistic. Big question that I get a lot, that comes up for a lot of readers of my stuff. But we're also going to be talking about egg cracking, that lovely experience of helping a trans person, typically, though we can talk about queer people in general, to realize that being queer is an option for them. You can't ever, as we'll get into a lot today, I think, force someone to take on an identity. You can't ever just free someone from their own like mental and societal prisons. Like, you don't really have that power as an individual, but you can do a lot to counteract all of the social conditioning they're facing that's telling them that they can't be anything other than neurotypical, able-bodied, straight, and cisgender. And just seeing you living your own life is sometimes the most powerful thing, as I think we'll get into quite a lot here. But we'll talk about how to also be a little sneaky and persuasive with it too, because we can take some pointers from the world of persuasion science. Let me get caught up with the chat. I left you with an opening question today. What was your egg cracking moment? So people who are watching this who are primarily coming from the autistic side of things, I know most of us are both autistic and trans, but in case anybody doesn't know, egg cracking is all about getting a trans person to realize that they're trans and to come out of their shell and blossom into a beautiful chicken or butterfly or serpent or whatever you like. And for me, there is a little bit more of a clear egg cracking moment where I had been questioning that I was trans online quite a bit, spending a lot of time on Tumblr. That's always where it fucking starts, is Tumblr. Reading a lot of trans people's experiences on blogs and things like that. And taking an interest particularly in kind of trans feminine experiences, trans effeminate experiences, really like trans masc femboy types, things like that. Getting really interested in all of that. But I was starting to make friends with other trans people online, and I was in a tabletop group that my friend Sarah, a trans woman that I met on Tumblr, was DMing. And it's actually a podcast, so you can hear me right on the verge of like big trans revelations if you're like interested in that. The podcast was called The Wheel in the Way, and it's like an actual play podcast with all trans people, all trans femmes, and then me. Classic. And I was playing this Melungeon hillbilly wizard trans guy in like 1920 or like Prohibition era New Orleans, which is very nice. And over the course of role playing that character, I was really exploring my transgender feelings. And Sarah was recommending lots of trans video games to me, like Porpentines, with Those We Love Alive, which I still really love. We Know the Devil, which me and Maddie have played on this channel. And then Casey Plett's, the Imogen Binney's book Nevada, or Nevada. Sorry, which was very good. And then Casey Plett's book, short story collection, A Safe Girl to Love. And I've talked about this before, so I won't belabor the point. I really, really connected with one particular story in that collection really well, that is about this closeted trans girl who, for all intents and purposes, she's living as like a mopey, sensitive straight boy who is just really romantically obsessed with her girlfriend, a cis girl, and just loves her in this intense, heartbreaking way. She just wants to kind of crawl inside and be contained by her girlfriend and disappear herself because she is uncomfortable with herself and she doesn't love herself. And it has this just beautiful scene of just like considering her girlfriend's body and back and just aching with longing and love for her, but also hating herself so much. And I recognized myself so much in that portrait and the way that I would get connected to romantic partners, like these, in my case, these little sad mopey boys who I desperately wanted to be, and hating myself while loving and obsessing over these people. And that clicked into place for me and made me realize that potentially the kind of intense romantic obsessions that I was often feeling for these artistic, mopey, tiny little sad wet puppy guys that I was always interested in, who were always pretty effeminate and fruity themselves, then maybe I was longing to be something like that myself. And then I thought I'd give that whole testosterone thing a try. And I kind of have become the little like mopey, sad little femboy of my dreams. And that did have some really interesting effects on my self-concept and attraction patterns and all kinds of different things. It's very weird when you have a physical type and then you become that type, and so then your attraction is like kind of free to open up to other things. But that's more of a dysphoria conversation. So that's my egg cracking answer. Let's look at what people have had to say on the chat, because I know the chat has been active since I got on here. Hello, Jonestown Teapot. Hi, JNKRS. I don't know how to shorten that, but hi, gay. Jonestown Teapot says, literally being on Tumblr and knowing trans women is what got me to come out. Also, hi. Oh no, my evil Tumblr from pre-egg cracking is here. You can change your YouTube display name if you like. I know some people have had to do that ever since we moved over to hear from Twitch. The Twitch ban is done on Saturday, by the way, so let me know if you prefer me streaming on Twitch or on YouTube. I'm probably going to still just do whatever I want, but I haven't decided what I want. Literally being on Tumblr and knowing trans women. That's basically what the pathway was for me. It has always been predominantly trans women, and then like trans effeminate, gender fucky, pervert, fucked up trans masks that have been there for me. I mean, pervert, fucked up on both sides of that identity slash there, but I'm just talking to a lot of kind of fagotized people and seeing their different modes of like gender expression and experiences, and consuming, for me, trans feminine narratives were just easier to relate to, for I think reasons that make increasingly more sense now that I'm on my whole like detransition gender fucky it's journey, that like that moving towards like any kind of like cis masculinity was not the move, but being what I was assigned wasn't right either. And there were just so many trans women who were so generous with their time and care with me, and that was real, and included me in things and validated me as part of the community from as early on as I wanted to be. I remember Sarah, who I just mentioned, my tabletop gaming DM, early into me thinking I was non-binary or something, kind of noodling around with it, she said to me something like, "Oh, it's kind of ironic because if you had been assigned male at birth, it seems like you would be more trans. But you're trans, but you just happen to be located in this presentation where you don't necessarily have to do as much. But it's kind of a almost quasi like trans feminine positionality, or not positionality, but like, I don't know, where I was going for, and that has ended up being kind of true." in a lot of ways, especially now that I have transitioned, and there are things about that whole estrogen thing that I really ended up wanting and liking. Hello, Rune. Good to see you. Very excited to see you at Fur Fest. I was just when we were chatting earlier today, I was thinking about your just amazing dancing and how like sick that's gonna look to see you like if hopefully I'm sure you're planning on probably doing a little spinning, a little dancing at like some of the Fur Fest raves in your awesome fucking dragon fits. Like fucking it's gonna be such a sleigh. I'm so excited for Fur Fest and all the latex and fursuit I'm gonna do. Mm, mm. Best thing about December. Male Valence says, I think just generally being in community with other queer people, especially online, was the big cracking for them. Yeah, it's usually not a single moment, right? It's an ongoing process of conversation, and slowly absorbing the idea that you can be who you are or who you want to be, or put aside identity. You can do whatever the fuck it is you want to do, which I think is often a more useful question. Jonestown said, to be fair, I was kind of evil. I needed to chill. Who else was evil before they transitioned? I've heard Chicago Janiza on Tumblr talk about their evil cisgender version of themselves, who would be more like just like cisgender woman beauty standards, assimilating and like more masked and things like that. And I definitely resonate with that. Like I could have just been a really evil, angry cis woman forever, and that would have kind of slayed to a certain extent. It would have been a nice, a cunty story, but a kind of a miserable reality. 10 o'clock scholar, hello, says, for me, it was just the cumulative exhaustion that did it. That and realizing that being 100% certain about transition was an unreasonable demand. Yes, and maybe we can talk about this on my next stream about stopping testosterone. I was reading a lot of detransition blogs, like TERF detransition blogs, because I wanted to argue with them in my head. I thought that if I could make up a perfect case for why I was definitely transitioning for acceptable reasons, that I had carefully considered the weight of my choice, that I was absolutely certain, that I was prepared for every possible eventuality that could happen, then they couldn't say that I was just some confused autistic girl who was too lonely and too much online and just decided to transition because I was impressionable and autistic or trying to escape sexism and all these things. And that's an impossible standard. You can't really prove one way or another whether any of those things are true. Like, we are the sum of our experiences, and you can't unknow or unlive the things that you have. And instead of being galled by this standard of the true transsexual, because this is where we get things like HSTS versus AGP and shit like that. Gatekeeping of who's the and transmedicalism, gatekeeping of who's the true transgender. We can just think about, do I want to do this thing or not? It doesn't matter if there is some kind of true transgender, which I don't believe there is any metric for. There's no brain science to back up this idea that some people are certifiably trans and some people aren't. There's no standard of like suffering you have to meet. It's an unreasonable demand, and you can just decide to transition. Male Valence said, someone inviting me to a queer online space that was open, saying stuff like there's no queer police or demand to see a badge. Yeah, I think it really is important to be inclusive if our goal is to build a space for questioning and closeted people to come out. Not every space has to be that, but we need those spaces desperately. And I think people who have not had the chance yet to build queer community or conceive of themselves as getting to be queer are some of the most vulnerable among us. And when we talk only about privilege and visibility shit, like, that can kind of elide that fact that certainly for me, the most dangerous time was when I was still a stranger to myself. Like, facing physical violence for being visibly transgender is obviously like a very real experience, but a lot of us have our lives are demonstrable proof of the fact that we would prefer to face that than to live in that state of not knowing. And so I think we have to be really welcoming towards the questioning and the closeted as much as possible, and not gatekeep that stuff, or at least have spaces where we're not gatekeeping that stuff. And most queer spaces, of course, don't actually do it anyway. Like online discourse is so much like tilting at windmills. Like when you go out into actual queer spaces, people aren't looking for badges anyway. Like all this fighting and discourse online is mostly something that people do to take a load off, to let off some steam and entertain themselves. And when you're in an actual queer space, like I've never seen someone say like, prove to me you're gay or you're trans or you can't be here. Jonestown says, the hold music is so appropriate for my mental state as I am on my lunch break at work. Yes, Tale of Tales, Endless Forest, a beautiful, chaotic deer game. Mavalent says, Dan Savage saying you can identify however you want, regardless of attraction, might have delayed my coming out. Many such cases. Dan Savage, the man that you are, man, derogatory. I got a lot of positive things out of reading Dan Savage because that's what it was available at the time. But I also got the idea of you have to be good giving in game. You know, you have to try these things that you don't want to do. The only way to satisfy like non-monogamous desires is to do this weird quasi-open relationship monogamish thing instead of communicating and actually being like polyamorous or something, or at least like consciously non-monogamous. Like, these days I'm not as angry with him as I used to be because now I understand a little bit hitting the limitations of what you are capable of as a human when you're put on a pedestal. And I think a lot of his biggest flaws were just that he was the only one out there for many of us at the time. But he is in me, for better and for worse. His impact is in me and all over my life and my writing and the life of so many of my queer friends. I know so many people who embarked on like straight, like monogamish relationships because he was the only blueprint they had at the time for that thing. So millennials and Gen Xers, we are fucked up, and Dan Savage's fingerprints are all over us. Round yourself down to straight, even if you are attracted to women sometimes. Yeah, he does not understand the bisexual experience or the trans experience. He doesn't really understand experiences different from his own. And he's a personality, and that is his only claim to expertise as an advice columnist. Like, he started his advice column with The Stranger in the early 90s because his friends were starting a magazine, and he told them you can't have a free alternative newspaper without having an advice column. And they just asked him to do it. And so he positioned himself as, hey, faggot. And the conceit of the articles were that straight people would write in with their sex problems to get a gay man's point of view. So it was an entertainment to fill space, to draw in readers, and to appeal to a straight audience from the very beginning. And I almost these days don't fault him for the fact that it became something so different, that it became many queer people's soul sex education because there was no alternative in our schools and things like that. But he's an entertainer. He's a commentator. He's like moderate liberal Rush Limbaugh of sex at the end of the day. And he does follow me on Instagram, and he has looked at my story posts sometimes. So, you know, if you want me on the podcast, Dan, I will do it. And I'll be mean to you for some things you've done, but perfectly charming. ZBJNKRS says, I'm on a very tricky level of Luigi's Mansion. Sick. Hey, Seb, welcome. Welcome here. I'm glad to see you. I know the streaming times usually haven't worked out for you, so it's really, really awesome to see you here, Seb. Years of Tumblr, and our friendship was definitely parts of it for me. That's awesome. I remember that when you were like thinking about being non-binary, and you were still working at the grocery store, and we were talking about it a lot, and how that was. I remember you saying something about how it just really brought a lot of positivity to your day in those early days, just like being able to think about like trans and non-binary stuff, just like while you're at work or while you're going through the day. And it's just like it was just like a pleasant thing to get to think about and try to figure out. And I remember those days. Oh, it's Artistic Bum. Okay, hello, Artistic Bum. I'll try to remember that ZB Jinx Drinks is Artistic Bum. Hello, hello. Phoenix Rise 23, welcome, says, I had multiple people tell me I'm trans without me knowing or realizing it, which makes me wonder and question, how did I not know? How could others see my transness but not myself? Um, we do a lot to hide it, and I think we have a lot of ideas about what it looks like that are not accurate. I know I took the media depictions really, really seriously and literally. I really thought when I was young that trans meant you would look in the mirror and you would see different body parts than what you actually had, that you would like think that you were supposed to have, like really feel in your body that you were supposed to have like broader shoulders and pectoral muscles, and be confused and disturbed in a very like clear way when you looked in the mirror and saw that that wasn't the case. And I thought to myself like, oh, I know what I look like, and I like some of it. I'm aware of it. And I hate some of it, and I hate myself for some reason, but that doesn't seem like the stereotype of what transness is. I don't feel like I'm trapped in the wrong body, you know. So when that was the narrative, that's what I thought it was. And the same thing, of course, is true of autism, and have written about that ad nauseum. I thought autism was this very visible thing, and the signifiers of what it looked like were a really narrow range of things. And so, and even when I met other trans people, especially, I still thought, well, I don't need to do all that. Like, how unfortunate that some people have to deal with all this hard stuff and all this oppression and everything. Like, it's so cool what they're doing, but oh my God, thank goodness I don't have to. But also feeling like I didn't get to, you know. Um, and you want sometimes this definitive proof. That's why we have all of those like, am I a lesbian quiz? Am I trans quiz? Am I autistic quiz? Fucking rads are. All that stuff is searching for some definitive answer to the question of how to understand yourself. And there is no external, objective answer to that stuff. There's just what works for you, you know? Hey, Maddie, welcome. Howdy, howdy. As I've said a few times on streams, it was MDMA for me. Hello. Yes. Check back some of the Time Theft Today streams to hear Maddie's story of realizing she was a girl using MDMA. I have some MDMA in my closet right now. Maybe I'll save it for FurFest. I want very much to use it, but I want it to be in the right space. So I think FurFest in a couple weeks, maybe I'll roll. I really want. I'm very envious of that story, Maddie. I really want a high to fix me. I keep asking for some great revelation, but it never happens yet. But I haven't tried acid and I haven't tried MDMA, and I really want to. So let's hope. Seb says, "What happened with the Twitch ban?" I was doing a presentation on how to shoplift, and of course that is against policy. And so, as I frankly expected, I got owned for that. So they put me on a 1 month ban. So that's done on the 15th. So we'll see what we do here. I'm honestly torn. There's such advantages to each one. Like Twitch, I like that I can raid people and send people over and participate in that community. I like some of the mutuals I have on there. I like that when you embed a Twitch link on Tumblr, it auto plays so people can watch the stream from Tumblr. I love that. I think YouTube appeals to normies. It's easier to just move the stream over as a video without having to edit it or download it. It works pretty seamlessly. I think the interface is better. It's easier to find the VOD for people. I don't know. I'm torn. We'll see. We'll see. Yeah, it was a trans woman who welcomed me into the queer community as well, which is what caused me to self-identify as bi. Yeah, I've it's always been in my life lesbians and trans women who have been the most actively, and obviously that's a hugely overlapping group, who have been uh the most encouraging toward me and actively encouraging to me, in including me in the community and helping me come into myself. It's just that kind of that feminized labor that like gets taken for granted, and all of that community building labor that people far too often undervalue or speak over. But yeah, that has always been it. That has always been the people that have been the most welcoming to me. Rune says, I'd love to bring a prop. Got to figure out the best way. Yeah. For spinning. I know, yeah, I keep meaning to get some of those like light up poi balls. I really want to learn how to use the light up poi balls for like dancing at raves and Fur Fest and stuff, especially Fur Fest because it's in this huge ballroom. Every year I think, oh, I want to get them. I want to learn how to use them. I love all of the light up like LED versions of like fire spinning, like the fans and all that stuff. Um, it's cool. It's very cool. Sporks. Oh, Transpeaks. Hello, welcome. Yeah, you can change the display name if you want, but obviously you don't have to. Welcome. Glad you're here. Good to see ya. Um, Seb says, I remember it was the 1st of January 2017, and I took a bunch of pretentious selfies and posted about it on Tumblr. That's the stuff. Yes, that's exactly what my coming out shit was, too. I took, I think it was Trans Day of Visibility. I took some selfies. I had just gotten my hair cut short. No hormones or binders or anything yet. It's just some pictures of me and dump truck, and I think I tagged it as like trans guys, trans visibility, trans boy, whatever. And it got for some, and like I think my homie Sarah, she reblogged it, and it got like way more engagement than I expected. Um, like a selfie too for like what I was doing on Tumblr at the time, and that just felt very. It's a small thing, but it felt very like welcoming. Like, oh, I don't look like anything yet. I haven't done anything yet, but people are still taking me at my word and including me, and that was just like a really nice little moment. I don't know. Self expression on Tumblr was really one of the primary ways for me for a really long time. You know, online self expression in general. Hello, CCHJ Productions. Always learn something new from your content. Thanks. Thanks for being here. Annika says, a trans woman on Discord straight up told me I was trans. I was in denial at first, but it planted the seed that caused me to come out a few months later. That is amazing. Um, and sometimes you really just have to hear it explicit. When somebody's denial is that strong and they're kind of pushing up against it, there are all those moments where saying like, girl, get real, this is what's happening, stays with you. So we'll get into the whens and wheres of that kind of stuff and people's feelings about that. And it's all comes down to time, baby. Like all you can do is plant seeds. Andriak said, I would never have started transition if I had to be 100% certain. Yeah, I would have never transitioned if there wasn't the option of informed consent clinics where I did not have to prove, because I would have never proven it. Like I would have, you know, I am all the trender red flags. I am that very witch, you know, autistic, eating disorder, dissociated, no stable sense of identity, da da da, you know, like all of that stuff. And aware of it and aware of what people think that means. And it turns out that is all in the mix, you know, like, of course that stuff affects how I feel in my body and my identity. It's not a problem, you know. The only reason it would be a problem is if we were starting like from the presumption that I'm like a failed like attempt at being a man or a woman. Like it's only if you think that like meeting some kind of very cisgender aligned standard is like the goal and consistently sticking with it, that it's a problem for somebody to not know what the fuck is going on. It's actually fine to not know who the fuck you are and to have identity confusion your whole life. You can be very interesting. You can have many lives, and that's really cool and great. It's fine. You don't have to be sure about anything. Transpeak says, she also gave me a space to talk a lot about my secrets, his feelings, and answered questions about HRT. That's awesome. So it sounds like you were ready for certain things, like you were in denial about it for yourself, but you really wanted to know and needed a safe place to explore that stuff. And that definitely comes up in the piece. Like having a safe place to talk about your feelings and ask questions is so imperative. Transsexual France Fanon. That's a great username. Said Dan Savage, my op for real. Oh, yes, it's on site. I know I just begged him to have me on his podcast, but drop your location on Bainbridge Island, Dan. I'm coming for you. Oh, just spilled coffee on myself. Yeah, Dan he's the whetstone that I sharpen myself against, you know? I love him, I hate him. He's me. He's he's my brother, he's my dad. I'm gonna kill him, like it's I left voicemail feedback on his podcast like every single week for months because he was constantly making me angry. And now a lot of what I do in my writing is to try and be better than him. So I have to thank him. Like I am aspiring to his gig in a lot of ways. I'm very influenced by him. And his attitude too, like that very like grumpy, sardonic Gen X personality had a really strong influence on me. As much as it fucked me up, there was also a strength to it that I got from it. So it's it's not all bad, but whew, it was a little tough there for a second. Transpeak says, in order for me to transition, I had to accept that detransition was a possibility. I got comfortable with the idea that transition was just something I had to explore. Yes. Detransition is a possibility. Regret is a possibility. Having effects that you don't like or that hurt in some way or that are medically negative, rare as that is, especially for estrogen, super, super rare. Estrogen is really, really safe. Testosterone is a more mixed bag. Sometimes stuff happens. We should, I think, have been learning from the disability liberation movement this whole fucking time and talked about the dignity of risk. I think as a political movement, we really ceded too much to the worst case scenarios and the framing of our enemies by saying, it's transitioning is always safe. Nobody ever regrets it. Like everybody immediately feels better once they do it. That was a argument that was pushing up against the idea that doing anything wrong, somebody ever having a negative outcome is the worst thing ever. And we should have just said, well, like, so what if there is sometimes a bad outcome? People get married and regret it. People get tattoos and regret it. Are we going to ban people from having that dignity of risk or what? But instead, I think we went a little bit more rhetorically in terms of this idea that transness was biologically verified and that there are true kinds of trans people. That if you can prove that somebody needs it badly enough, then they get to transition, and it's an identity rather than a series of behaviors that are available to anyone. And that, detransition is not like the end of the world. Lots of people do it. Some people, it's a terrible period of their life. Some people, it's a choice. And a lot of people, it's something way more complicated than regret or I am this, I'm not this. Videnis says a mushroom trip and then accepting I would never know for sure and that the only way I'd know was to try. And boy, once I tried, it was amazing. Yes. Yeah. There's no way to know for sure. There is no knowing for sure. And that has been a major gift of aging and life experience for me, is getting more comfortable with the idea that I'm never really going to know for the long haul, like what I feel about something. It's a ride. Some people do. And it's just this difference between this discordance of experience between people who they transition and they instantly feel better and right. And it's aside from the oppression, which is a significant part, like they know that that's where they want to be and they're willing to fight for it. And I do kind of sometimes envy that clarity, even though a lot of times people who have that clarity, it's really, really hard won, and it's a really, really tough life. Jay Devin says, Dan Savage feels like the evil opposite of religious purity culture. And I don't think he's actually evil, you know? Like, I think aside from, okay, I'll take that back. He's very much pro United States colonialism, so that's evil. Like, he was very pro war in Iraq. So, in that sense, he's evil. I think, in terms of his sexual politics, I think he does represent this very like amoral sex positivity that was a overcorrection against puritanism and like sex negativity, and it served its role for its time, and it was appealing because of that. But it's a dialectic, baby, and we can do better, and we can continue to fight. And I'd really love to be on his podcast to talk about sex neutrality. I really would. I think it would be really cool. I think he wouldn't like it. You know, like I think he has a very limited view of what sex is in his mind because he believes in sex exceptionalism. Like he thinks sex is this exceptional, good thing for the most part. But that it also has unique power to harm. And so somebody coming in and saying sex can be anything and sex isn't a big deal, that would really freak out his very non-asexual cis gay mind. And I think it would be a really good podcast episode. I want to be frenemies with him. So putting that into the universe. Male Valence says, what I needed to hear was being gay is cool and hot and more people should be gay. As Danny Lavery once said, we all have a responsibility to be the gayest version of ourselves. And what your gayest version is might be different from what, my gayest version is. But all we can do is just be as gay as we can be. Even if you're straight, be as gay as you can be. Rather than let's ignore the parts of ourselves that don't fit and identify with the status quo. Yeah. Yeah, the bigger problem is people being denied the chance to be themselves and denying themselves. The bigger problem is not people claiming to be queer or claiming to be disabled when they're not, or they're not enough. It's lovely you remember those conversations we had about it. Oh yeah, absolutely. Tumblr chat. Hello, Akdas Aftab. Thank you for subscribing. I gotta update that subscription message so it shows dump truck again. That's the other reason to switch back to Twitch. Oh, you're bringing some light up poi balls too, Rune. Awesome. Yay! Oh, it's gonna be so fun. I have another friend who's like a burner type person coming, who is like a steampunk cat. This like steampunk orange light up cat. So maybe y'all will meet. Male Balance says I prefer Twitch, but this is fine. Maddie says the MDMA was really only the beginning. It literally took constantly ruminating on it for at least a year. Yeah. After I had my Casey Platt Safe Girl to Love moment, it's not like I started tea right then. I still had a couple of months of just like, I remember what I was listening to. I was listening to a lot of Gary Newman's Berserker album, which is just like very industrial and like triumphant and nerdy, and he's very autistic and weird. And I was just walking around in the snow, listening over and over again to Berserker and thinking about, should I do it? Should I not? And I was also listening to the Shins' Phantom Limb, which is a song about like a lesbian couple, but the implied phantom limb is like a missing penis, so you could read it as like a trans narrative too, but it's about being closeted and doing things together on the weekend, but then pretending to not know each other at school. I'm sure many of you, excuse me, many of my millennials will remember that song. I was really interested listening to a lot of music about like hiding in public and choosing whether or not to kind of take off your mask. And then the floodgates finally opened around my around my birthday of 2018. Male Valence says if we stay here on YouTube, we can turn more normies into freaks. That's the idea. Wildheart Hermit says, would it be too much to dual stream to both? Well, technically no, but we would have to choose which chat to have. which link for me to post and which chat to use, because otherwise I'm going to just confuse people with both. So I could technically double stream and probably get away with it, and technologically probably figure it out, but I would need to have one chat that was the one that got focused on in both. So that could be a little confusing. Jay Devon says my final straw was Daniel Lavery coming out and the Merry Spinster. Hell yes. Yeah, Danny Lavery. I got in right before Danny Lavery in terms of uh, generations of trans internet people transitioning. And my piece about Dan Savage and the time I got breakfast with Dan Savage was on Danny Lavery's website, The Toast, back in the day, before either of us transitioned. So, getting pancakes with Dan Savage, that was the piece about a true encounter I had with the very man in high school when he was my hero. And says, I'll bring my fancy stick LEDs for you if you want to try them. Yes, I would love a demo. I want to get into more like movement stuff. I'm in general like contact improv or like ballet lessons or spinning, because more like subtle movements seems to be good for hypermobility. I'm very jerky moving, and I just want to get more at home in my body and things like that and work my shit out, especially as it's too cold to like run now. A trans Closet Demon says, meow, hi. Thanks for giving me the motivation to get out of bed to watch this. Welcome. Glad I could help there. Welcome out of bed. Yeah, it makes me happy to see and interact with people like you who aren't 100% sure but do it anyway and make it your own. Yes. That's all we can do on this bitch of earth. If human bodies were more like web avatars, that would be really nice. Closet Demon says, my final straw for coming out as queer was that there was some person in a club that I was in that was a lesbian, and I wanted to be like me too so badly. And a transsexual Friends fan and says, that was for me, but for anything involving gay men. Yes. I had a very early crush on a gay male bestie when I was very young, and was always really close with gay men. So I was like, that's it. That's my route. That's where I should go. And but it was always very like nerdy, effeminate, sensitive gay men who like their egg could have cracked in a second. Like, and uh, it ends up being that most of the men that I related to eventually became trans women. So you know how it is. Bree Bree will be listening while making soup. Hello, hi, meow. I love gay people. Yes. You'd love to see you fight Dan Savage. Oh my god. Uh yeah. He's buff. He's scary. I don't know. I don't know if I could take him or not. I have the advantage of youth, but he has the advantage of working out with the dedication of a very wealthy gay white man on Bainbridge Island for decades. With the anxieties of being a public media figure. He got like that Joel Kim booster shredded at a certain point. Seb says, if I didn't die from heat wearing just a t-shirt, then fursuits do sound like fun. Fursuits are fun. It's a great blessing that here Midwest Fur Fest is in December, where it's nice and cold, because that shit does get a little tough otherwise. Ooh, I'm so excited. I'm so excited to wear my fursuit and my latex and my deer hood and my gas mask, and to just like get to be around people as that. It's the most comfortable environment of the year for me by far. Like, I wish life was just like that. Just socially, how people interact too. Melvalen says, I would be so happy if the gay man I have a crush on turned out to be a woman. Oh, yes. Yes, yes, yes. With the power of bisexuality, anything is possible. Anything can happen. And the power of transgender too. All right, and that same fucking gay man, that I had an early uh teenage crush on. When I came out as trans, he kept kind of interrogating me, but that was just his way of communicating. Like, we were on the debate team together, so we were very blunt with each other. He kept interrogating me about how I knew, why I was using certain labels, like agender at the time, and like what was the point of that label, and like, and he basically said something like, well, if these feelings you're describing are trans, then that means I'm trans. And it was like, well, yeah, sure, yes, yes, you're very transgender, dog. um and as we will get into today, I think that's a very common thing to hear from relatives when you think they might be autistic and you're trying to tell them to consider that an option. That, oh, you can't be autistic. Everybody feels that way. Reaction from a parent who is very, very autistic is so common. Closet Demon says egg. Yeah, it was very much that branching path, gay, in your 30s, or your 30s are approaching. Are you gonna crawl up Twink Death Mountain and start going to the gym, or are you gonna estrogenize and become a girl, um, the girl that you always were? Because he was very part of why he was uncomfortable with me transitioning was because I was in his mind as a like strong woman, and he was very, very attached to his divas, to his strong women. He had um, figures like Hillary Clinton that were like his mother goddess diva, like powerful women, powerful gender nonconforming women who were bold and outspoken and communicated very assertively, and were very career oriented and intelligent. And like, he loved his divas. Lady Gaga was another one of his divas. He loved her strong, freakish, combative, fashionable personality. And I was, I was one of his, maybe not one of his divas because I didn't have that kind of glam, but like, I think he was kind of attached to the idea of me as one of his strong women. So when I was like, actually, I'm not going to do that, uh, he was like, but you can just be a gender nonconforming woman. Why not? So he wanted to Pokemon Go to the polls. Yes. Yeah. And he's like a Democratic strategist now in Ohio. So that it is what it is. Things could have been different, maybe, but who knows? I don't know what's best for someone. I just have thoughts. I just have opinions. So we've been talking a lot today about, in the context of transness, realizing you're trans, realizing you're queer. And we will continue to draw that parallel throughout this piece that we're talking about today. But what we are really here to talk about in terms of text is cracking the egg of an autistic person and what works and what doesn't. But we're really talking about both throughout. But there are some differences, some similarities and differences to them that we can mine. Before diving into the piece and reading it out loud, I'm going to do some bubbles. This is to help me breathe better and get air flowing, and also making sure that I am speaking correctly because I don't normally move air the way you're supposed to for all kinds of reasons, from hypermobility to training myself to lower my voice by putting my tongue in my throat. To correct all of that shit, we start off these streams sometimes with blowing bubbles. So feel free to join me. A little ASMR moment for a second here. And one more. All right. Thank you for enduring that. Lua says, "Hi, first time catching the stream live. Yay! I love blowing bubbles. Yes. And for my singing lessons, I'm supposed to also do like notes, like whatever, to get me better at moving air while singing. Progress is coming. I've had a few times during singing lessons lately where I'm like, oh, this actually sounds like a song. Like I'm actually singing. I'm not just hitting notes in a very separated glottal way. It's flowing. So that's been nice. Autistic Bum, right, says, I never had an official coming out. I finally realized I was bi watching Marissa Tomei as Aunt May. For me, coming out has been telling usually fellow queer people spontaneously. Yeah, coming out is a never ending process. I really don't love the framing of like National Coming Out Day or coming out as being the most important thing because it's not a single event. It is a social relation. CCH says, it's frustrating being an autistic kid as I want to connect with my boomer dad about our autism, but he really doesn't even want to look at the identity. We can talk a lot about that today because what autism means to him is probably very different from what it means to you, and getting him to get more comfortable with the idea. Well, first it needs to start so that he can better relate to you, so that he can see the identity and how it's a positive for you, and useful as a tool. And if he can get to that point, then maybe he can find the autism label less threatening. But it comes down to whether he's willing to do that inner work or not. Like, is he willing to read books about autism or watch videos? Is he willing to listen to you? And if he's not the kind of person who does that, there's kind of nothing you can do, which is really sad. When you have this chance to connect and a person doesn't take it. But that's often what it requires. Transpeak says, Devin, your hair looks really cute. Thank you. The last few weeks is the happiest with my hair I've ever been in my life. It's got these little curlies. I got like long kind of mullety vibes going. I have not cut it at all, so it's all the same length. And I actually really fucking like it. I'm really close to Fugtrup Dark Link hair. That is my goal, is Fugtrup's version of Dark Link. That is what I want to manifest for myself. And then I'm going to start wearing like dark lipstick again. I would put an image on the screen of Fugtrup Dark Link, but I would immediately get banned because it's all porn. But it's like kind of a Karen haircut. Hold on. I'm going to make a crop of it and show you. It's kind of like a fucking Karen haircut, but it's on a boy. And I don't know, it just slays. So I'm going to save as PNG, Fugtrup censored. I just need to get like little longer hair tendrils, and then it'll be the shit. Let me bring this image on here. Create new image. Okay, browse, downloads. Oh, that's huge. Very large image. But this is the vision right here. Fugtrup Link. That's where we're going. I mean, I'll be there. I'm like practically there. And I love the lipstick and the little collar. I'm just Fugtrup Dark Link, period. Like, so yeah, we love it. How do I delete this? Remove. Yes. So yeah, thank you. My hair growing journey has been very fun, and my hair's darker than it ever has been before. It's more curly, and I think those are all testosterone things. Slay. Lost generation dad is never going to identify as autistic. Yep. Sarah, Kia ora, welcome. Good to see you. Thanks for popping in, my friend. Closet Demon says, my dad keeps going back and forth about being autistic as if he's not the reason I am. Yeah. Some people, it's the like, well, I functioned this much so far in life, so I can't really be. Like, those are people who really love, like, on the spectrum as a term, which I know a lot of people find it offensive, but I really don't mind on the spectrum. I feel like it has a lot of accuracy and utility. I feel like talking about queer identities as being on spectrums is very useful to me. Like I feel like I am in some ways less trans than somebody who like has very clear like dysphoria and then a very clear remedy to it. They know what they're about and who they are. Like I don't know. Like I think for some people talking about things being on spectrums is kind of helpful, but that's me. Subsets coming out was a big thing early on for me, and my sister couldn't understand not telling my parents. But it became a lot more comfortable just deciding with and how much I wanted to come out. Yeah. Prince Fanon says, I got my mom to accept her autism. Now she's looking at reading stuff to help. That's so nice. That's wonderful. Lua says, your earring with a key is so cool. Yep, it is from Vitali, which makes a lot of like kind of gender neutral. All jewelry is gender neutral, but whatever. Gender neutral industrial jewelry. It's a oil slick key. People always ask me what it's the key for. It's not a key for anything. I got it years ago. I've always liked keys, um, and oil slick shit. So that's actually all it is. Maeve Ellen says, do you style it at all? If I cut it that short, it would just stick up everywhere. Well, the first thing to know is when you first cut your hair, you probably already know this, but your hair goes into shock. When you have long hair and then you cut it, it's losing a lot of weight and the ends are going to generally kind of spike up because it's in shock. So your hair has to adjust to a big cut. And so that's part of why it really stands up tall at first. For me, styling wise, I just wear a bandana to bed. And that usually gives me a little bit more shine and luster too. I've learned a lot of this stuff from having partners who have textured hair, coil hair textures, like non-white people with like more woolly hair textures, and like learning a lot about like silk pillowcases and like curly girl method and stuff like that. Even though my hair is straight, wear a damn bonnet. Like I mean that really worked for me. A bandana like helps just push because I want the hair not covering the ears. I want it to kind of swoop back. And so I just do that with the bandana and like sleep in it. And that helps. And that's kind of it. I don't shampoo. I've been a no poo girly for many years. I like shampoo at most like every couple of months or like if there's dandruff or something, but I really don't shampoo. I condition a little bit as needed and like use conditioner to wash my hair. And I don't actually brush that much either. Like I'm very like just set it and forget it. So I did get this one gel, this Paul Mitchell soft hold gel, for slicking it back. So if this hair isn't really acting right, I'll dampen it and then push it back and comb it. And it does a pretty good job. I want to do a fully slicked back look soon when it gets longer. Kind of Lady Gaga in the art pop video where she's like the centaur person, that kind of like slicked back, wet look, bob. But yeah, mostly I don't style it. I thought the key might have been a kink thing. People are always asking that. Even at work, people are like, what is it a key for? And it's like, wouldn't you want to know? I finally did decide to switch it to the right side since that's like the sub flagging side, just for clarity's sake, but it doesn't actually mean anything. Like if you want to think of it as like a self-collaring, I can set myself free at any time kind of fucking thing, you can kind of think of it like that, but it's not really. I like keys. I I have for a long time had this intrusive thought of like for some reason like putting a key in my rectum and turning it and that's somehow opening something like spiritually. I don't know. Or like keys in bodies, like I don't know. There's something about keys. I like the keys are like kind of delicate but also phallic. Like keys have always felt very like magical to me. um reading like The Secret Garden too young and things like that, like books for kids that come with like small little old keys. I've always had lots of key jewelry. I just actually just like keys as a symbol of like delicate freedom or whatever. um that's actually all it means. Spectrum isn't less or more. It's got so much use for different ways queerness can manifest. um my mom used to say add every day when I would do something strange when I was young. But as ADD. But as a young adult, when I neutrally suggested the possibility she may be neurodivergent, she crashes out. Yes. Yep, many such cases indeed. Um, France Fanet says, I never really heard anyone talk about T changing hair texture until I and other black trans guys share about it. Oh, I would love to hear what your experience was. Did your hair get more tightly coiled or more loosely coiled? Because I've just mostly heard hair texture change coming from people with straight hair whose hair became curlier. That's mostly just what I've encountered, and people saying their hair got darker, which is fun. Um, yeah, I really like it. I always wanted darker hair when I was younger, but I didn't want to dye it because I just if you get the wrong like tone of hair dye, like it can look not not great, and like I don't know, a lot of things don't go with my like undertone for my skin. So I really am so happy that my hair is darker. I'm really so happy that it has a little bit of movement to it. I've always wanted that. So yay, testosterone doing that. Conditioner only plus silk bonnet will save your life. It's true. It makes such a difference. My hair used to be so frizzy and dry, and that stripped some of the color out of it too. That's part of why it was lighter, I think, was because I was shampooing like every day. It was horrible. And I really hated my hair when it was like that. And for many years now, I've been a no poo girly, and weaned off of it. And now I am obsessive about keeping that moisture in and protective strategies for hair, whether that's a silk pillowcase or a bandana or a bonnet. It makes such a difference. And then you're like looking good for whenever you want to have a particular style going on. And I don't use any heat either. As it gets longer, I might have to actually get a hair dryer. I know Maddie told me I should have a hair dryer in my house. So, but I never, I use cold water only when I do wash. I wash it very limitedly, all that stuff. Seb says silk pillowcase is one of my best purchases. Much nicer for keeping your head cool at night, too. I've considered stopping shampoo, but my hair feels awful if I don't shampoo and condition regularly. Oh, and you have such beautiful long hair, Seb, too. Like, it looks very luminous a lot of times in your pictures. When you stop shampoo, this is the same thing is true for like skincare stuff. Like most of us, if we've been using the products daily that we've been told we have to use, our body is getting dried out all the time. And so then it's overcompensating by producing more oil, which can cause acne, oily hair, limp, lifeless hair, whatever. And so when you first stop using shampoo, your body is still overproducing oil, and so you have to use a combination of like baby powder to absorb it, dry shampoo to absorb it because that's just powder basically, brushing it out to distribute the oil throughout the length of your hair, and also just tolerating the discomfort if you can, or if you decide it's worth it for you. And then eventually after like a month or two, sometimes faster, your scalp stops producing as much oil and it regulates. And the same thing is true for a lot of skin stuff. I'm a big fan of Jessica DeFino's Substack, The Unpublishable. That's all about how we don't need the thousands of skincare products that like fashion magazines and influencers tell us that we need. Most people are stripping all of the nutrients from their skin by washing too much, and then they have to put it all back on. Or they're not getting the nutrients they need for their skin because they're not fucking eating, and then they think they have to put like some vitamin E cream on their face. So I'm a big believer in you need fewer hair products, you need fewer skin products, for the most part. But if that's an optional side quest. Your hair looks really beautiful, Seb, so I'm not saying you need to stop shampooing, but that's just what worked for me. Closet Demon says, was funny when T changed my hair. Gave me a widow's peak before it changed my hair texture much. The new hairs that came in were coily, and I just had a tuft of coil right at the top of my forehead. That's so fun, because different parts of the hair grow at different times. The other hair change I did have was like slight hairline masculinization, which does tend to be one of the earlier changes. It's a little bit more squared off, but it kind of always was for me. Even in pictures from pre-testosterone, I always had kind of a square masculine head taper. So Yeah. Da, 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 da. Closet Demon says I can cope with oily hair, but now I don't have any, so I'm going without doing anything about it and seeing if my scalp stops freaking out. Yeah, yeah, you might be able to do that. It's kind of easier, I feel like, when your hair's short or you're bald. Hello, Waluigi and Bowser, welcome. We've just been dithering so far, so no worries. Welcome. Um, Artistic Bum says my hair has been getting coarse, and some individual hairs dry in waves. I really hope I'm on my way from straight to wavy. That would be lovely, wouldn't it? Franz Fanon says, my hair's been getting more tightly coiled. I have a heterogeneous curl pattern, but all of my hair got more coarse and coiled. Even body hair. That's really cool. DJN, is that DJ on Dion from Twitch? Maybe. I'm black and my hair is more loosely coiled now that I'm on T. I'm a bit bummed about it, not gonna lie. Yeah, I could see why that would be kind of uncomfortable. Interesting that it can go in either direction. I would have thought more coiled just because I know people that have gone from straight to curly, but I guess it could be all kinds of things. And this stuff happens on pregnancy too for a lot of people. So like hormonal changes change hair proteins and texture. DJ on Dion, yes, it's me. Yes, context clues. I got it. I don't know if I could stop washing my face though. OCD would want death. Yeah, that's fair. You know, it's whatever you need, whatever you prioritize. Like, I like to keep it loose and goose. Anything that tells me like, oh, you don't actually have to do that self-care thing, I'm like, yes, great, because I didn't want to anyway. All right, it has been well over an hour of talking about transition stuff and coming out stuff. So let's dive into the dang old piece a little bit. But please do remain active, your active, beautiful, bubbly selves in the chat as we talk through this one. You can read along at drdevonprice.substack.com. The piece is called The Ethics and Tactics of Telling Someone You Think They're Autistic. Also relevant if you want to successfully crack a closeted trans person's egg. And it is free to read, as all my writing is, on my Substack. And you can go read along there if you like. I can post a link in the chat, actually, too. Let me change my hold screen thingy, just so people have it. And I'll pin that shit for you. Is my screen share not working all of a sudden? What did I do? Display capture. Device not connected or available. There we go. Primary monitor. Boom. Okay. Weird. All right. So this piece I published last week. Its cover image is a photo from Unsplash, a stock photo, close-up of an egg atop a white background. It has a kind of central crack, almost like a thumbprint, and bits of shell radiating out, and then kind of a hairline crack going around the edge. And that image is from Zunaira Bilal Anjem on Unsplash, referencing, of course, egg cracking as a experience for trans people. Online, the ethicality of labeling a public figure as autistic without them having publicly claimed the label is a subject of some debate. Neurodivergent people in fandom, being obsessive catalogers of our favorite blorbos, every mannerism, and personal factoid, have a tendency to pattern match our own experience onto those of our faves, and speculate excitedly that these parasocial besties might just be one of us. When I get to feeling loose and unfiltered, I am certainly in the habit of doing it, and not just about public figures that I like. On live streams and Tumblr, where I tend to censor myself less, I've speculated that everybody from Taylor Swift to Grimes to Ron DeSantis is autistic, as well as some celebrities I actually like. And I'm not alone in any of these. I really think more than gay lore, autism lore is masked autism lore is way more likely to be true. It can be therapeutic, seeing that some of the traits of ours that are the most highly stigmatized are actually present in individuals who are socially beloved or rewarded for being unique and strange feels good. Representation helps to normalize difference and expand the realm of what is considered possible. It's also tempting to see our highly maligned disability as a possible source of strength, and to imagine that it's possible for us to make a creative life for ourselves out in the world, even if we find mere existence to be hard. I know I felt that way when I read about Fern Brady smashing up her house in a fit of work stress in her memoir, her wonderful memoir, Strong Female Character. I do very much the same thing and had always feared that it made me an abusive, crazy person. Thanks in part to Fern speaking so openly about her meltdowns, I can now say that yes, I am in fact a short-tempered, explosive, crazy person in the mad pride sense of the term. And yes, I am using that word with intention. It is healing to see oneself in others. Yeah, house smashing meltdowns, very, very relatable to me. And had not ever heard somebody talk about it before. But there are many people who critique the autistic community's tendency to point at everyone who resembles us and foist our label on them. Typically, there are arguments that we cannot possibly know the reality of a person's life simply by watching a curated selection of their interviews and performances, and that the temptation to project one's deepest desires onto a parasocial figure, who might even be deliberately performing a faux vulnerability or awkwardness as part of their brand, can too easily lead us astray. And I'm talking about Taylor Swift. She writes a lot of songs about feeling like an outsider, feeling like the uncool girl at high school, and mirroring other people and imitating other people in order to make them like her because she grew up not being liked. And that all sounds very much like a masked autistic experience, an evil autistic masking manipulator experience that I definitely relate to. And I find it one of the most interesting things about her. But as wonderful autistic trans YouTuber Alexander Avila talks about in his video on Taylor Swift, these are choices she is making about how to present herself. That she comes from a cultural milieu where young millennial women entering their careers at the same time that she was were trying to be disarming and adorkable. And that was how they resolved the contradictions, to use a Trillbillies phrase, resolved the contradictions of entering into adulthood at a moment in time where it was very difficult to succeed, and sincerity of desire and ambition was kind of increasingly seen as embarrassing. That we weren't allowed to strive anymore, but we millennials had been trained to strive for excellence, but to always be self-effacing and act like we weren't trying or that we weren't really succeeding. And we kind of see the echoes of that now in Zoomers, who are also culturally often pretty afraid of sincerity, like in mainstream culture norms that a lot of Zoomers absorb. It's like you can't sincerely want anything. But before that kind of performed disaffection, there was the millennial performative, awkward, adorkable, oh, I'm so cute and lovable, but I'm not really trying, but oh, I'm just failing upward kind of thing. That was very useful, especially for white women, to attach to themselves, because then they don't seem too aggressive. They're not threatening to men. It helps to hide some of their privilege. It meets a lot of different needs all at once. It kind of allows you to aspire to something, but then if you fail, you can kind of just laugh it off. There's a lot of reasons why coming into adulthood during like the Great Recession as a white person in the empire, it was kind of useful to put on this performance of, oh, I'm so awkward, I don't fit in. I'm all of my great success, being the greatest, largest female billionaire in the world, is really just me making up for how awkward I feel. And I'm really still an underdog all along. So it could be that her very autistic masker seeming personality is just song lyrics that a lot of girls relate to for a lot of reasons. The additional main critique that people make is that throwing a label onto somebody else is invasive because how they see themselves is not our business and could be professionally or personally damaging to them. So it's best to just not bring the subject up. Many queer celebrities have spoken about how intense speculation from fans forced them to out themselves, for instance, losing work opportunities after they have. Here's a couple of examples of that. The first is one of the actors from Love, Simon. This is a video from friend of the show, Matt Bernstein. Or really, I'm more of a friend of his show, Matt Bernstein. I would love to have him on here, but you know, he's got those big numbies. A actor on Love, Simon. There was a lot of fan speculation about whether he was queer or not, and accusing him of being a straight person, gay baiting by playing a queer character. And so the actor felt that, this is about the author. Sorry. The author, who is a bisexual woman, had to come out about her queerness because of fan speculation about whether or not she had the right to tell queer stories. And this also happened to one of the actors on the show, where he was accused of queer baiting, and he had to come out as gay and said that it really bothered him to have to prove that he had the right to play this role because people were being so invasive about his identity. So it happens a lot. Another big example is Matt Bomer of Fellow Travelers and lots of other shows. He was outed early in his career. That's Matt Bomer on the left. And he tried to recloset himself in order to continue to get roles. And he lost a lot of professional roles once he was out of the closet as gay. And it's because, because Hollywood is still homophobic, but also because he was really going for a lot of these like handsome male heartthrob hero kind of roles. He could have been a Superman, right? Like he looks like a Superman kind of figure. He could have had a career that was kind of similar to actors that have played Superman. But once he was gay, he didn't have that broad appeal where straight male viewers could aspire to be like him, and straight non-fujoshi female viewers could want him. So it really tanked his career and his bookings. But thankfully, he's taking on lots of gorgeous gay roles, like Fellow Travelers, which is one of my favorite shows of the last couple of years. Really, really good. This conversation closely parallels the one in the trans community about the ethics and tactics of egg cracking, the process of telling a seemingly repressed trans person that they are obviously trans. People online like to debate the so-called egg prime directive, which is a reference to Star Trek, about not intervening in alien life that hasn't first made contact with space and kind of spacefaring society. And the egg prime directive states that a person should not intervene on a closeted person's journey unless they specifically ask for help or say the word "I'm trans" first. A lot of trans people are critical of the egg prime directive, especially and most vocally, I think, trans women, who argue that there are so many societal forces pushing trans people to remain closeted that it is ridiculous to consider it pushy, invasive, or in any way abusive to provide someone with gentle encouragement to consider an alternative for themselves. To put it another way, nobody on the planet is forcing anyone to be trans or gay. We simply do not have the structural power to make something like that happen. This world that we're in requires everybody to be cisgender and heterosexual with force. And it is both a blessing and a miracle that any of us get to learn to be otherwise. And we should be spreading the good word of autonomy and queerness as widely as we can. So to even mine the analogy more closely, the prime directive from Star Trek is about not violating a culture that has not yet arrived at the technical innovation of visiting space yet on its own, that would in some way kind of dilute the culture or give it undue external influence. And it's almost like some kind of decolonial strategy, but it's not really, right? Because it's still a maybe not colonizing power, but yeah, a power that's kind of dominating space, deciding the fate of other people. But it's with the intention of not doing that. This kind of non-intervention is meant to give autonomy to the society that hasn't made contact yet themselves. So the spirit of it is kind of positive, even if the execution is weird, and there's lots of Star Trek episodes across the franchise that problematize that directive already, right? If your policy is non-intervention, what are you going to do when there's a genocide, a war, or a disease that you and your technology has the power to treat, but the people on this planet can't access it because they don't even know that's an option? So even in Star Trek, they are very aware of the problems with the Prime Directive as a way of reducing incursions on the autonomy of people. That if we have the Prime Directive, because the goal is to maintain the autonomy of people who haven't traveled into space yet, you are still violating that autonomy by not letting them know that that they have options that could preserve their lives and their cultures that are just, a few feet above their planet on a spaceship. So even in Star Trek, they know it's kind of got some issues. And the analogy also just does not cover over to trans people, where if you are interested in trans people's autonomy, you would want to give them options. So if they could potentially be trans, you may want them to be able to know that. If they are having an experience that they don't recognize is dysphoria, but it's causing them distress, and you can help them understand that it's dysphoria, why would you not want to give them better tools to understand themselves? Or at least potential tools to understand themselves. So if the idea of any kind of non-intervention directive is to trust a person's own journey, to empower them to make their own decisions, which is to say, uplift their autonomy, then why would you limit their access to information and community? Those things foster autonomy. It's kind of rooted in this assumption that being trans is rare or negative, and that more people being trans isn't inherently a good thing, which is not what we believe around these parts. And so, intervene. But do it effectively. That's my only point here in this piece. Tips for if you're not sure how to intervene, or if your attempts at intervention in the past have not gone well, this piece is for you. Oh wait, no, I already said that. I am no fan of the Egg Prime Directive, and I do not think there should be an autistic equivalent. If it weren't for autistic people speaking openly about their identities on the internet and warmly encouraging others to consider an autism label for themselves, I would have never figured out that I was part of the community. I would have just carried on thinking I was a misanthropic, pissed off, constantly crying, evil freak. I needed help coming into myself, but that help had to come gently. And while on a philosophical level I see no issue with ever encouraging a person to adopt a new label for themselves, as a social psychologist who devoted many years of my career to the study of persuasion and behavior change, I do have a few tactical pointers for people who want to help a closeted autistic or trans egg out of their shell. There is nothing wrong with wanting to uncrack an egg or trying to, but if you actually want to succeed in this endeavor, you got to do it well. And you got to have an awareness of the limitations of your power to crack that egg, because that'll make it less heartbreaking also for you and help preserve the relationship. So that is the raison d'etre for this article. For me, realizing I was autistic and realizing I was trans were both Tumblr and like early 2010s, mid 2010s internet journeys. Lots of YouTube, really long discussion-based YouTube videos that I just sucked up like a sponge. Lots of just listening to weird little people on the internet, on Tumblr, microblog about the way that they thought, and recognizing myself in these incredibly like analytical, weird, detached, obsessive, online only people who that was their main way of expressing themselves, was like being weird about some subject online. That was like, oh my God, that's my people. It's like reading the inside of my brain. So here is our question from the day, sorry, from Tumblr user Faith from a New Perspective. Here's a screenshot of the Tumblr ask. I know you're not an ethics guy, but thoughts on outing / trying to out a celebrity as autistic. Realizing I can't just keep sneaking notes with resources on autism that they might find helpful to signings, but I'm not sure how else to get the message across. Also, people on the internet are so genuinely unhelpful and don't tend to understand that it's not saying anything mean to suggest it. So, Faith here is asking very specifically about outing a celebrity. What do you do if you want to convince Taylor Swift to admit she's autistic? What do you want to do if you want, Grimes is out as autistic now, but if you want Grimes to say that she's autistic, or any number of Drag Race girlies? That is an interesting question, and I will answer that question in this piece, but I thought it would be useful to also touch on, your mom, your neighbor, your friend, your partner. What do you do if you think they're autistic? What do you do if you think they're a trans egg and you want to crack their shell? Because really your power to uncloset a celebrity is pretty limited, and a lot of the conversation of is it ethical to talk about comes down to like fandom shit, rather than an actual like relationship with someone, and you don't really like even collectively have the power to make them come out or make them read a book or help them. You can't help them either, but people in your actual life you can do that for. So we're going to talk about both. But feel free to put your favorite autistic or trans egg celebrities in the chat, because we can use them as discussion examples. And I'm just curious. I've shared some of mine. You can share some of yours. Thanks for asking this question, Faith. For a variety of reasons, I do not think the ethics of encouraging a person to see themselves as autistic is our main concern. I do have ethical issues with harassing a person, demanding personal information from them, invading their space or bothering their loved ones, pressuring them to reveal highly stigmatized information, or humiliating them, unless they are Ron DeSantis or someone whom it would be similarly beneficial to the universe for us to psychologically terrorize. But what you are asking about, Faith, is decidedly not that. You are asking about whether it's okay to want to help, let's say totally at random, Katja Zamo to consider the possibility that she is on Team Trains. One of my favorite Drag Race girlies. I will just highlight this piece right here about not harassing public figures that you think are gay or trans, or you're wondering if they're queer baiting or autism baiting. It helps nothing. It's cruel. Going into someone's personal life is where the ability to write your real person fanfic ends. Real person fic is legal, and it's the only way to get into heaven, as Chicago Geneza says, but don't actually fuck with somebody's life. If you're not doing that, then you're not doing anything invasive here. Okay, so we are assuming here that we are not planning to invade a person's private life or actually force a public label onto them. So no pressuring them to come out and out themselves either, because being out is very different from realizing that you're something, and it's very risky. So we're not doing anything that is already violating our ethical precepts here. So fuck ethics. We don't need to worry any further about ethics. We're going to not do that stuff. Let's talk tactics. If our goal is actually just to help give a person more autonomy, tools that will foster their autonomy and happiness, what is actually going to work at making that person change their identity? There is a big difference, after all, between what you as a person have a right to do and what will actually be successful. This is one of the unacknowledged disjoints in radical left politics that tends to steam my broccoli the most. Being morally or factually correct is not the same thing as winning. You might have the right to post online about how tismed Katya Zamo is on every forum in the world, make dedicated TikTok accounts about it, or shout "you're autistic" at her during a live show. But if her making a comfortable, empowering, consensual self-realization as autistic is your goal, well, then you don't want to do anything that's going to make her feel pressured or judged. One of the number one rules of behavior change in general, whether you're trying to get somebody to mask more, whether you want somebody to get tested, to read new information, to reconsider their opinion, if they feel pressured or judged, they don't want to do it. It doesn't matter whether you're right. That is still going to rankle them. Also, attitude change takes a long time. That'll be one of the other big takeaways today. You have to warm your egg up to the possibility of being autistic or trans or gay first, and then let them think that arriving at that identity was their idea. This is attitude and behavior change 101. Step 1, incubate your egg. Warm them up. Get them nice and cozy and comfortable so it's safe for them to come out. Make the surrounding environment as much like the comfortable, safe womb that they are in as possible, so the transition is not jarring. Telling a person how to identify when they haven't necessarily done the work yet of unlearning what being autistic, disabled, trans, or gay actually means is only going to put them on the defensive. It will often inspire them to argue against your point automatically, which may polarize them against it. That is one of the first responses people have to being told something that runs counter to their existing attitude, is to poke holes in it and find all the reasons why it might not be true. And once somebody has made an argument against a point, they have some investment in that position that they've argued for, and so they may dig their heels in further. So you don't generally want to come at somebody guns blazing in a way that's going to make them feel that they have to argue with you. It is important to remember that what autistic means to you may not necessarily be what the label means to the other person. You, if you're even having that conversation, have probably spent years consuming online content about the autistic experience, meeting and chatting with other autistic people, reading books about autism, and processing all of the complex emotions that arise when figuring out that you are disabled. What I thought autism was when I was first Googling it, or when a family member asked me, "Do you think maybe everyone in our family is autistic?" was not the reality of what autism is. And almost none of the qualities of autism that I have that are me are ones that I knew about at that time. I have a recent-ish piece on Substack called Common Phase, it's a year old, called Common Phases of Accepting You're Autistic, that walks through some of the process that I see a lot of people undergoing and how difficult it is to just completely rethink yourself as not ever being capable of aligning with normative standards. There is a lot of grief that comes with realizing that it's always going to be hard. There's a lot of questioning of yourself. There's a lot of obsessively reading about autism and making autism your whole personality for a while, and then eventually kind of resolving and seeing yourself as a fully rounded individual about whom autism is just one fact. And so that takes a long time, and you can't jump ahead of that for someone, even if you're putting mushrooms in their water supply, which could help. You can't hit the forward button and spare them all of that difficulty. If they're going to do it, they're going to go through their own journey of unlearning and rethinking themselves, and they're probably going to be mega annoying for a while, just like most newly out queer people, just like most new vampires. They're going to be wild fledglings. You have to let them be fledglings, and you can't really skip that. Most of us were socialized to see disability as a horrific condition that can and should be fought with self-denial, and a state so othering and dehumanizing that we would know if we had it. Coming to accept that we really could have been disabled all that time is a world-shaking revelation, and it frequently comes with periods of resistance, anger, disempowerment, and grief before we arrive with pride and acceptance on the other side. I'm sure there are people likely in the chat who are like still going through thinking about what being autistic means for them and their life. It's kind of a lifelong adjustment. And here we can kind of invite a little bit more discussion of experiences of disability, people who you had a disability that you couldn't recognize at first. What was moving into realizing and admitting to yourself that you really are disabled and you really do need to do something about it and you're never going to meet abled standards. What was that like? I'd love to see in the chat, especially disabilities other than autism, because most of us can probably already relate on that. So I'm curious. For me, I'm thinking about realizing stuff like hypermobility stuff, slow dawning awareness of just like all kinds of little like injuries and pains and things that and tensions and things that I do differently and things I find difficult that I just always mentally like did not look at. But that also I could get away with not looking at because I am like abled in most respects and have a lot of privilege that comes with that. But there's a lot in the whole spectrum of disability where people, because they have to get to work, they just live in denial about their flare-ups and times when they can't function and things they can't do. And you can very much mask a physical disability as well. So if people want to share about experiences of coming into just generally accepting that you're disabled, would love to see any shares about that in the chat as well. Your autism, if you've gone through this whole process, then is not the average person's idea of autism. Most people still have years of unlearning ahead of them. Years of unlearning. And it is easy for the average autistic person who has made their own disability into their special interest to forget how little someone who is not obsessed with autism really knows about it. To quote Randall Munroe, even when they're trying to compensate for it, experts in anything wildly overestimate the average person's familiarity with their field. So even if you know most people don't know autism like you know autism, you see autism everywhere, you know autism is a neutral thing, that already puts you ahead of 99% of humanity. And so you can't just hop right ahead, and I'm guilty of doing this sometimes, to like pathological demand avoidance is cool, like we should all get more disabled, like this radical stuff that I say. It doesn't make sense if somebody is can't even conceive of a person realizing that they are disabled being a good thing. There are some steps along the garden path they need to walk on before they get there. Airgender says, I'm on a pretty similar oh shit hypermobility journey to you. I think it's a journey. Yes, yeah. I've been watching videos. I did a little hypermobility workout today. One of the first times in my life where the workout was like, do a small lift of your hips off the floor rather than cranking that shit as intensely as you possibly can. So many things are making sense, like knee injuries I've had, arch injuries, like how I just can't really stand still why I've never been able to sit for long and been really antsy. Like movement is really important if you're hypermobile. The fact that I can't like sit normally is partly this is a thing in hypermobility that I just learned about this week. Over relaxation. That when we try to relax, our joints tend to just collapse on themselves. And so it's more appealing for us to like not sit on the couch and have slight muscle engagement, but to just fucking collapse like a bag of bones and sleep, like curled up like a cat or whatever. And it's because you need that stabilization from the surface area of the couch or the floor. I've always loved sitting on the floor. I've always loved sitting with my knees pressed to my chest. It's a search for stabilization because everything moves so much and so easily, um, that I've been holding my breath to try and stabilize my core. Like that my posture is like really ridiculously like, that like anterior pelvic tilt back bend thing. Like it's all it's all hypermobility, dog. And someday I'm gonna write about it, but I need to learn so much more. Starlit Guide says, it destroyed my identity as the strong one, the one who could handle the heavy lifting, the one nobody needed to worry about, because I pushed myself to being sick all the time and ignored it. Yeah. I know a lot of people in the chat can relate to that. That your coping mechanism has completely broken down. Your source of trying to negotiate social safety is just not there. Like your value add, the way that you were trying to sell yourself to people in order to earn the support that you needed is not going to work. So how the fuck are you going to get it? Valence says, my CFS, chronic fatigue syndrome, came on suddenly, and there was a big change in my abilities, so it didn't really seem like I had a choice about self-identifying as disabled. I mean, at first I thought I was acutely sick, and it just didn't go away. Yeah, so early days I didn't self-identify. Right. Temporarily embarrassed abled person kind of thing is a very common self-identity for a lot of newly disabled people. Seb says, I think it was a really difficult thing to come to terms with my back issues, that it wasn't just something that could be fixed, and the pain and mobility issues would linger forever. And it's something that medicine is not structured to accept about us either. Everything is acute treatment based. And so they make it very hard to accept or to even document in research that that's not the course of a lot of people's experiences. Airgender said, it's kind of validating because I did a lot of, I feel like this is a limit for my body, but I guess I'm just lazy because I'm not really disabled like my friends are. And now in hindsight, that makes sense. Yeah, definitely energy level stuff for me. Like I just really have to like admit like, oh, I need a lot of just time sleeping after being around people and in the dark and things like that. And in this year, part of the hypermobility journey has been really recognizing the limits of what I can do to my body with exercise, and that it is better to not push myself. Like I've always, my little bargain with reality was, I will be okay if I am tougher than everyone else. If I am just like superhumanly insensitive to my own pain, and I am in a competition with everyone to see who can endure the most. And it's so cool that I can go so much harder. And that is how I will distinguish myself and feel like I'm going to be okay. Because then anything bad that happens, I know I can endure it because I'm stronger than anybody. That was my little fucking, cope. And learning that pushing myself to the point of injury all the time makes me weaker anyway has been a needed corrective and exercise in patience. Disability pride is a longer and more complicated journey for me. I still have to figure out how to function in capitalism because right now I'm not financially independent. And pride is not, we don't owe anyone pride. That's not a sign of like success as a disabled person. Like you can hate being disabled your whole life, if that's what feels right for you, or neutrality, body neutrality all the way. Because it just comes down to having your material needs met, just like you're saying. Like what matters is that every disabled person should be able to live in comfort, privacy, dignity, autonomy, no matter what they can do. Closet Demon describes disabilities as background noise. I didn't realize anything was wrong with me. My unhealthiness was always blamed on my fatness. I thought I just deserved it. Yep. Diagnosis fat. Many, many, many such cases out there. Complete hostility to medical care for fat people means that you can have broken bones and cancers for years without doctors even taking a look. The healthcare system here doesn't really work well for long-term issues as well. Like there's very little continuity, and you really have to fight to get the bare minimum of treatment. Yeah, that's another piece, is the lack of care continuity. Like how long will it be before I have another hypermobility injury, and then I would have to reestablish care with the providers that I have that actually care about it and know about it at U Chicago, which is a wealth to even have that option. Most people can't just do that. And it's just sheer like luck of the draw and resources, having like a middle-class job in a major city that made that possible. And getting to pick who I saw. Soup is done, sending y'all some telepathically, also free latex stuff. Yay, that's fancy. Moving right along. Generally, if you really want a person to take the possibility of their being autistic or trans, etc., seriously, you have to break the ice first. Attitude change research shows us that most people's opinions on most subjects are crystallized. They are not immediately open to changing what they believe, and will find any suggestion that they should change their belief either threatening or annoying. And this is because of the role that crystallizing attitudes plays, which is stabilization. You have to preserve mental energy to function in the world by taking certain things as a given. And non-autistic people in particular seem to be way better at crystallizing and not questioning things, because it preserves energy and it's efficient. Imagine how unstable your life would be if every single thing that you thought about yourself was open for debate. You could not function easily that way. And so you take a lot of beliefs about yourself and the world as solidly true and try not to think about them. Most people are like this. So if you want to get them to change their views, you've got to get them comfortable with the possibility first. This is something that the social psychologist Kurt Lewin called the unfreezing stage of attitude change. Here, when we're talking about identity change, we can call it egg incubation. And this can be small things and big things. It can be things like, I don't like bowling, or I am an introvert, or I don't like this food. If you haven't tried those things, if you haven't socialized a lot in a couple of years, it may be the case that those things have changed. But if you're just making a decision at the end of the day about what you want to do with your evening, understanding yourself as needing time alone, not liking bowling, and not liking, liver might help you make decisions about where you're going to go. And so if you took all of that completely as unassumed and knew nothing about yourself or how the world functioned, you would be just overwhelmed with decisions all the time, and you wouldn't be able to organize your life or have any observations about what you need. So we all have frozen attitudes, which is to say attitudes we either see no point in looking at, or we've never thought to question. And so most people are moving through the world with a frozen attitude about whether they are disabled. Of course I'm not disabled. I have a job. I went to school. I look like this. I work hard. Like it would be really inconvenient if this were true. Like it doesn't hurt that bad, etc. Everyone's like that. How do you get them to unfreeze that crystal? A person is most likely to change their attitudes when they're motivated to do so, either because it would directly benefit them to see things in a different way, or because there are massive social incentives. So this even applies to something like prejudice reduction. People get less biased, not because they decide it's the right thing to do, but because it's socially popular to do, or it benefits them to do it. That is, for the most part, why people do things, is because it benefits them, or it's socially rewarded, which also benefits them. Going back to my obsession of the moment that human beings are not moral actors. We are social actors and resource needers. You can create a social incentive to see autism differently by being friendly, warm, encouraging, and respectful of a person's autonomy. People open up when they feel like they are in control of their reality and they perceive themselves as safe. This goes back to Heather Morgan's point at the beginning of Unmasking Autism, that you can't ask a person to pry off the mask if they feel that the mask is what's keeping them safe and they are afraid of what's underneath. So you have to get them feeling safe first. Do not directly challenge your eggs, argue with them, shout over them, move too hastily, or force a conversation at a moment where they don't want to have it. Do not tell them what you think is best for them or press on if they are at all upset by you doing that. Foster an environment of mutual respect, and admiration, and present yourself as open to discussing whatever the egg or closeted person wants to discuss. When it comes to approaching a public figure, this means being nice and highly respectful of boundaries, not invasive or parasocial or overly familiar. When it comes to a person in your private life, it means speaking gently from the heart about your own feelings while empowering the other person to feel however they want to feel. So, I think most people innately know to approach this way when they're trying to crack eggs, but I think there are exceptions. I think that does not invalidate egg cracking to be critical of some of the ways that I've seen people do it that can be pushy in the past. So I do know a few people who they get a little too proud of seeing themselves as the egg cracker, and they come to people with a little bit of a spirit of arrogance of like, I can tell you're trans. You need to just get over the denial and take the HRT. And that is kind of a dismissive attitude. And even if you've seen it 1,000 times, so you know that this egg totally is trans, and you just want them to skip that painful denial phase for their own good, you want them to have not suffered as long as you did, you actually can't do that. And nobody really likes being told that somebody else knows them better than they know themselves. And most people don't want to be just like a badge on somebody's Girl Scout sash, right? Of like, egg I cracked. So I have seen that happen a few times. I have seen people be pushy to someone who's like drunk or on drugs at a party, a transgender party, and somebody's going in really hard telling them, here's what you need to do, make this appointment, you need to come out to your partner. I got a little bit of pressure from one online friend when I was starting to realize I was trans. Like, they were really wanting me to sit down with my partner and tell him, like, have you done it yet? You need to do it. Get dinner. Here's how you do it. Da, da, da. And they were trying to be encouraging, but it made me really stressed out and upset. And when they saw that, they should have stopped that tactic. And I just had to do things in my own way, which was to quietly start testosterone and change all my documents and name without telling anyone, and then forcing people to deal with it months later. That was my journey, But again, none of this is to invalidate the practice of egg cracking, and I don't think that's the majority of people. But I think we can get jaded or think we know better, and that's not always the best. That's me just straight up telling men on Grindr to take estrogen. Well, I mean, Grindr, you don't have an ongoing relationship with them, so it's fine, like, just whatever. Just blow dart them with estrogen, it's fine. I think there are some people on estrogen that are like if I meet some DL guy in the suburbs on Grindr, I am not invested in that relationship enough to do the delicate incubation. So I will tell them like, sweetie, get out of the closet, shut up, like, stop being this straight guy thing, you're gay. Like, I will, but that's because I don't actually care about them, right? Like, I don't know them as a full person. I'm seeing them as a type. Like, if that is a thing that stays in their mind and it helps, great. But like, I'm not actually investing in that relationship, and it like shows. And like, that's fine. We don't have to care about everyone. We don't have to make everyone a project. Yeah. It works. I've cracked almost 10 eggs that way. Well, God bless. So most people respond to it and they're like, tell me more. Oh, geez. That's definitely like, at like Fur Fest, I'll meet a certain type of like alternative, queer, but relatively isolated person who like, they're really nerdy, but that's their only exposure to stuff. And then you tell them like, oh, like, you can just take hormones, you can just be non-binary, you could just do whatever. And they're kind of like, oh, word? And they've never heard of it before, and it's like life-changing. Bree says, the tough love route worked once, but on a very close friend that I've known for a decade that was hitting a wall at the time. It was very specific. I told her when are you going to let yourself live? When are you going to let yourself live? Yeah, the slap in the face. Oh, did I already talk about this? That I'm going to give out testosterone at FurFest? Speaking it into the world, because I have all my testosterone. I've got boxes and boxes of T gel, and I'm going to pass it out at FurFest. We have people that come here from all around the world, including many states and countries where access to HRT is not common. And lots of people don't even know that testosterone gel is an option, which was so important for me to have like a easy, no shot, light way to start testosterone. I'm not using it. I could donate it in a couple of different ways. And I want to share the wealth. I'm going to think might have a little sign. It's also very normal at FurFest to have give out stickers, books, which I've done, music. People just leave out free things. So I'm going to bring several boxes of T gel with me and give them out to people. Yay. I'm so happy. I'm so happy to this is like the, the transition, switching clothes, giving people your old clothes kind of thing. Transpeak says, most people just get confused when asking them to take estrogen, but then some get vulnerable and start talking about how they have thought about it or have fantasies. Then whole conversations start. Oh my God. That's so sweet. And I think it's like impossible to just, as a stranger on Grindr, actually be pushy to someone because they can leave the conversation. It's not like you're friends. It's not like you already know each other. It's not like you actually have the power to like pressure someone. Like you're just saying like, hey, no, you're screaming trans. Everything you're doing and giving is screaming trans. So like, why don't you do it? And if they choose to engage, that's them. That's on them. Devin, the testosterone fairy of FurFest. Oh, I should get some wings. That's I love that. We can, I think, approach a lot of strategies of change, remembering how you're supposed to treat a person in an abusive relationship. We do not pressure abuse victims to get out of abusive relationships. It does not work. I have a whole article on this, and the research is very robust on this. What someone in an abusive relationship is generally dealing with is having their autonomy taken away. And you don't solve that by reinforcing the narrative that they don't know what's good for them. If you're being abused, you generally don't have a lot of self-confidence and empowerment. And so you don't fix that from the outside by reinforcing to someone that they don't know what they're doing about their life. Abuse victims are competent. They are making decisions about what will keep them safe and meet their needs, and sometimes what they want to do. And sometimes that means staying with their abuser for a while. But what you can do is foster trust and support for their autonomy. Reinforce to them that you're smart, you are capable, you know what's best for you, you're interesting, I'm listening to you. That is how you help someone get the confidence to ask for help and get out. So instead of pressuring them, we help them to feel capable, safe, and smart so they can decide to leave their abuser and use whatever help you have to give in that regard. And being in the closet is very much like being in an abusive relationship with the whole of society. If you're a closeted person, disabled or queer, you are being abused. You are being punished for how you are until you fall in line and hide it. And so you don't step out of that shell or that closet unless you feel like you can handle it and that it's the wise move, and that there's a safe place waiting on the other side where you'll be accepted no matter what. So you want to foster for the person that sense. Step 2, speak from your experience. If your goal is to bring a person over to the autistic, trans, etc. side, you got to get the person to feel okay with that being a possibility for themselves. You have to help them to see that being autistic or trans is actually not that scary. The best way to do this is often to speak from your experience personally without putting it on to the other person at all, because then they have nothing to argue against or feel defensive about. When I was first starting to explore my trans identity, I joined a genderqueer discussion group at Chicago's LGBTQ Center on Halsted, Genderqueer Chicago, which still runs now under different leadership, which is a good thing. One of the rules from that group was that attendees should only ever speak from the I. We could share what we felt, what we had experienced, and even facts as we understood them, but we were kind of supposed to say, as I understand it, or what I've read is blank. We couldn't tell another person how to label their experience or what they should feel or do. This rule prevented needless fighting about any number of issues. It's just kind of good for avoiding unnecessary conflict in general. And it made the space far friendlier to questioning and closeted people who weren't sure of how to label themselves. I find that the policy of speaking from the I remains helpful in any kind of emotionally charged conversation, but especially about identity. It allows the listener to project themselves into the speaker's experience without feeling exposed. It's not, you're definitely disabled, you're definitely trans, and you need to do this. Which personally, if somebody said that to me, PDA is like locking down. I would be pissed. Like, it would have never landed well with me for somebody to be that direct. It also gives their brain some additional perspective-taking work to do, which is better than giving their brain the task of disproving your argument that they are totally autistic and need to get on HRT already. So when you're giving people information or you're communicating with them, their brain is doing some additional work. And that work can either be trying to understand you and trying to picture what you're describing, or it can be arguing with you, or generating their own unique response in some other way. But if you tell a really captivating story about your journey and how you realized you were trans or autistic, they're probably, if they're locked in, they're going to put a lot of mental energy into visualizing or placing themselves inside that story. They're following the story. They're kind of on the journey with you. A good story is a lot like a trance in that way. It's a heightened state of consciousness and an altered state of consciousness. And that is very effective for getting people to imagine feelings that they're normally not comfortable with. Narratives are very powerful. Storytelling is very powerful. And it's one of the most persuasive things there is. If I were to hear somebody tell me that I must be ADHD because I force myself to check the clock and my phone notifications constantly because I have no self-trust I'm going to notice them organically, and because my only file organization system is to dump everything that I need into a downloads folder full of 50 gigabytes of old invoices and screenshots, I'm going to feel judged. Who says that my stressful seat of the pants way of doing things is some psychopathology? What the fuck do they know? I've never missed a deadline once, because I have given myself multiple stress-related illnesses instead. 1, nothing wrong with me. 2, nothing wrong with me. Here's the song, Drowning Pool, Bodies. You may know as, let the bodies hit the floor, let the bodies hit the floor. A song I love and play anytime somebody like Dick Cheney or Charlie Kirk dies. And it also has the line, 1, nothing wrong with me. 2, nothing wrong with me. And there's a really excellent version of it by Neil Cicierega that I wish I could play. Hold on, let me see if I can pull it up. Floor Corn. How do I check to see if it has... because he doesn't list a lot of his music on streaming, so I don't think it has copyright. Neil Cicierega music copyright status. It isn't entered into YouTube's copyright ID, and Neil tends to be pretty generous with letting people use his tunes. My head is in that song now. That song is in my head now, thank you. I think I can play it for a second. This is very self-indulgent. This is Neil Cicerega's version of Let the Bodies Hit the Floor, mixed with Popcorn by Hot Butter. God, it's so good. I love this whole album. I need to stop it because popcorn is probably not protected. Damn, you get the idea. That's floor corn. I might have to edit that out of the VOD. We'll see. But Neil Ciceriga's Mouth Moods, best album of time. Nothing wrong with me. I love Neil Ciceriga so much. But if I hear a friend tell me that they keep their books organized in a toppling, dust-covered pile and routinely forget to eat all day or what day of the week it is, then I might feel pleasantly comforted by our similarity, then later sit down with myself and go, huh. This is an important pointer for attitude change to keep in mind. Persuasion is more likely to stick if the person arrives at the conclusion themselves. Do not feed the conclusion to them if they are in the resistance phase. Give their mind a little puzzle to solve later. This is the exact same mechanism by which a Facebook power user gets indoctrinated into vague conspiratorial connections, into joining a group like QAnon, but for good. Part of why QAnon was so addictive to people was because they were constantly analyzing these vague messages, these Q drops, and drawing associations that were completely made up by their minds. This is why Gaylors go farther and farther down the rabbit hole the longer they're into Gaylorism, because they are looking at every single thing Taylor Swift posts for Easter eggs that are signaling that she's gay. And so they see more and more confirmation over and over again for what they believe. They are doing something that attitude change researchers call elaborating. And elaborating is just thinking about ideas, creating your own unique thoughts in response to ideas. And so they're elaborating on Taylor Swift information constantly until they see confirmation that she's gay everywhere. And when you're figuring out whether you're autistic or trans, you also start elaborating. You think about all these things that happened in the past and recontextualize your history. You notice things about yourself and other people, and you start elaborating. And then maybe you arrive at, oh my God, I've actually been really transgender this whole time. Why didn't I realize? Am I screen sharing right now? Yes, okay. In the case of a celebrity, you might want to share that as an autistic person, you resonate so much with hearing them talk about their sensory issues or obsessive special interests or whatever else it is that you see in them that reminds you of you and your autistic kin. Then speak about how sensory issues, special interests, whatever, feel for you. Don't point out every autistic or trans trait that the person has. Talk about how discovering you were autistic felt for you. Maybe even how surprised you were to initially find out. That is the opening story that I tell in Unmasking Autism. And that is what gets people. That is the massive, persuasive power of the book that has people like react really, really strongly within the first few pages. I tell the story about realizing I was autistic and the denial and the ignorance that kept me from being there in the first place. So I invite the reader to walk through the process of unlearning what autism is right along with me, which means then they do not feel guilty for being ignorant about the subject, and they don't feel threatened or like they're being talked down to by someone who thinks they know more than them. They are projecting themselves into my story and seeing a lot of parallels. I present my younger self as just as ill-informed about autism and resistant to the label as anyone could be, because I was. And by modeling my own attitude change, I help unfreeze the reader's attitude too and show that change is possible. The whole book is unintentionally informed by a lot of my persuasion and rhetoric experience, that you unfreeze people with these stories, you give them the information that they're going to elaborate on subconsciously during their downtime, and then at the end you kind of refreeze by kind of culminating in a whole summary judgment of like, okay, you're autistic now, here's what that means. You have been brainwashed into autism. Bree says, I had to stop reading your book because it made me too emotional when I know I already identify as autistic. That book wrote itself pretty easily because it was years of thinking about this really hard stuff. But it was also like kind of triggering to write at the same time too, Like I was not doing great as I was writing it, and it is still tough to write and think about as much as I do it. Like talking about masking stuff and feeling like a freak kind of never stops being painful. If you're trying to crack the egg of a person in your private life, you can share how meaningful it has been for you to figure out that you're autistic, and then talk about some of the traits you had never realized were related to neurodivergence before. Frame this as a positive. You have so much understanding now. This news was a good thing. And step 3, be grateful to the egg for listening. What advice columnist does this come from? I think this is a Dan Savageism. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. Dan Savage used to say, don't bring up new information as if you're announcing that you have cancer. He used to say this about telling a partner about your fetishes. This is solid advice, I think. People will infer from your tone and the emotional vibe you're giving off how to interpret what you're telling them. And so if you say you're disabled like it's a bad thing or like you're anticipating judgment, they will meet that energy or they'll feel discomfort coming off. But if you present the information as great news, I have new information about myself and I'm so happy and empowered and it's good for you. Here's why it's good for you to know this thing, because now it'll help our relationship and I'll be happier and whatever, however you want to frame it, then they feel way less threatened too. So Dan Savage brought that up for introducing a fetish to a partner as like, great news, here's this fun thing we can play with, instead of bad news, I'm a freak who needs this thing and now I need you to do this thing for me. Framing can help. Step 3, broadcast warmth and gratitude. No matter what you do, your average egg is initially going to see the possibility of themselves being autistic or trans as negative. This is true even if the person is accepting toward disabled or queer people. Being a marginalized minority in the world is hard, and realizing that you are never going to escape the subaltern status is not a solution to life's problems. It is another problem that sometimes people just aren't ready for. This is a reference to Mad Men. Joan Harris telling Roger, I'm not a solution to your problem, I'm another problem. Former mistress that he's throwing himself at during a time of crisis with his second wife. You can help your eggs get over this fearsome hurdle by making the conversation as warm, positive, grateful, and celebratory as you can. Dan Harmon famously figured out that he was autistic because the autistic community was so vocally supportive and grateful about the depiction of Abed on the TV show Community. Harmon did not know that he was autistic at the time that he was writing Abed, but he infused this intentionally neurodivergent character with his own passion for television writing and building story arcs. So Dan Harmon was very autistically special interested in narrative, and so was Abed, and so that ended up helping him recognize himself. He eventually pieced together that his own interpersonal difficulties were probably related to his being autistic. Harmon, at that point in time, was not harshly questioned about his identity early on, and essentially nobody criticized him for things like co-opting autistic stories. It just wasn't the time when that kind of thing happened. The year was 2009 when Community aired, and most of us were thrilled to see an even remotely heartfelt depiction of autism on screen. And so he was bathed in recognition and warmth. This probably helped motivate him to more closely research autism of his own volition and embrace the identity for himself and several of his future characters, including Rick of Rick and Morty, who does explicitly call himself autistic. If you want to tell a public figure that you see similarity between themselves and your autistic or trans self, take care not to frame every little single behavior as being inherently an autism thing. After all, autistic traits are human traits and exist throughout the population, and the line between categories is fuzzy. Instead, you can frame it in terms of your thankfulness that they are broadcasting and normalizing what are typically highly maligned or stigmatized aspects. By framing the similarities you see between yourself and the other person in terms of gratitude, you immediately warm the person up to the autistic community and leave them feeling empowered rather than gazed at from under a microscope. Generally speaking, most people do not like feeling as if others think they know them more than they know themselves. It is a very exposing position to be in, and coming from someone who does not know you personally, it can be presumptive. But many a trans or autistic egg has come into themselves because they've realized they are surrounded by many who get them and feel at home among them. Going back to public figures, how many public figures have we seen transition who their route was, why is my work so popular with transgender people? What is going on here? That is so many YouTubers, that's so many comic artists, that's so many people like online personalities, podcasters, streamers that I can think of. They started out as just being themselves, and everybody who vibed with them was trans. And eventually they realized, oh, these things they can mean that I'm trans. And I'm now, the possibility of being trans isn't as scary because there's people around me who are trans that I can talk to. If you are approaching a famous, maybe autistic or maybe trans person, make it clear to them that your community looks upon them fondly and considers their work to be a welcoming space. This in turn will make them feel more at ease talking to other autistic, trans, or queer people and potentially opening up about the topic themselves. If you're attempting to crack the egg of a regular civilian in your life, share your appreciation for how non-judgmental, supportive, and open to learning about your experiences they are. A lot of us start out as overly invested allies who ask a ton of questions because we want to fight for trans or autistic liberation with all we've got for some reason. You don't have to tell such a person that they are autistic or trans if that seems like it's not the right time or moment. You've just got to offer up answers on a preheated, glimmering platter. Where's all my former overly invested allies in the chat? I know I was. Why am I so passionate about correcting pronouns for this person? The first trans person I've ever met, when everybody else doesn't care about it. Why am I fighting with a classmate about transphobia and obsessed with how they're transmisogynistic? Why can't I stop thinking about it? Why do I seem to care more than anybody else? Why doesn't anybody else care? Etc. Step 4, share resources. In my book, Unmasking for Life, I write a lot about the proper procedure for getting a possibly autistic family member open to the idea of their own neurodivergence. That's in the family chapter of the book. So if you want a really in-depth guide on the subject with tons of possible resources to share, I would direct you there. That chapter is all about, I found out I'm autistic, or my kid found out they're autistic, but my mom, my grandma, my uncle, my cousin, they're autistic as shit. How do I get them all on board with the idea? That is like the big one. So if you are on that walk, which is a really common walk, I have a whole passage in that book about that. Night Owl saying, not me getting really angry at my therapist for celebrating how great of an ally I am. Ew. Definitely don't tell somebody that they're straight. Like, egg prime directive, whatever. Tell people they're trans, tell people they've got EDS, whatever. Definitely don't tell somebody that they're straight for them. We should never tell somebody that they're straight or they're cis. Like, we should never be doing that. I think we can all agree on that. Like, don't give up hope. Everybody can be gay. It's not too late. Oh, thank you, DJ on Dion. I'm glad you liked it. But in brief, it all comes down to this: giving resources. Do not overwhelm someone with a ton of information all at once, and do not expect them to inhale it all and completely change their view all at once. Attitude change is a slow, self-directed business. We change our own minds. This is just like how you can't actually be hypnotized by someone else. All hypnosis is self-hypnosis. So you have to wait for signs that a person is already opening up their perspective and keep offering encouragement and answers that are appropriate to the stage of the journey they are at. For people who are completely new to the idea of destigmatizing disability or even what autism really is, personal narratives and lighthearted media tend to work the best. My book is on a lot of people's lists, but I really recommend Fern Brady's book, Laura Kate Dale's book, Eric Garcia's book, Anand Prahlad's book, Sarah Kirchhoff's book, Reese Piper's article, and so many TV shows and YouTube videos featuring autistic people that have done a great job to take the fear out of autism and help a broader, more diverse contingent of us find self-recognition. I have a whole long list of resources in the book, but just to run down this list for anyone not in the know, Fern Brady's excellent memoir, Strong Female Character, all about being autistic and bisexual. Laura Kate Dale's Uncomfortable Labels, My Life as a Gay Autistic Trans Woman. Great source on how you can have the female autism as a trans woman. Why do people not understand this? Very common experience. Eric Garcia's book, We're Not Broken, which profiles lots of autistic Americans. Anand Prahlad's excellent book, very poetic. I love this one. The Secret Life of a Black Aspie, a memoir. Also, genderqueer, Anand Prahlad is, and an older person. So you get more of like what being a closeted autistic genderqueer person in like the 60s and 70s is like, which is really cool. Sarah Kirchhoff's book, I Overcame My Autism and All I Got Was This Lousy Anxiety Disorder, a memoir. That'll resonate with many a mass autistic girly pop. Reese Piper's Secret Life of an Autistic Stripper, still one of my favorite essays of all time, talking about how being in the strip club really kind of, the norms of it really accommodated autism pretty well for her. Like it was a system she could learn. It's one of those pieces I just reread regularly. And as far as YouTube, Ask an Autistic, Neuro Wonderful by Myth Shaber, Ryan Finn's videos on autism, Herbs and Altars videos about being autistic and trans mask, but very like femme presenting. Love those channels. For possible egg mode trans people, I really think nothing beats a personal, heartfelt narrative. I watched Gigi Gorgeous and Steph Sognati videos. She was like for some reason, watching like Steph Sognati's transition videos in real time, because she was just like transitioning around the time I was starting to think about it. It just connected with me. I already mentioned Casey Plett's amazing short story collection, A Safe Girl to Love, which was like the final trigger pull for me. That I needed to do this transgender thing. All of her work is so good, but I love this one the most. After a person has gotten familiar with the life stories of multiple autistic or queer people, you can start offering resources that are a little more tailored toward accommodating disability. Present this merely as a tool that will help them better understand the autistic people in their lives, especially if you have a resistant, like grandmother, parent, older adult in your life, that they don't want to think about themselves being disabled. If they have a grandkid that they want to get along with better, that's how you can kind of backdoor them into learning about autism. For possibly trans people, share resources about common stages of transition and even how to be an active ally to someone going through transition, because that's a way to trick them into learning about transition. If the person you're trying to reach is a family member or a parent, telling them that these resources will help them understand and show up for their loved one is a great way to open the door. A lot of people become more openly autistic in small stages, simply by incorporating more disability inclusion into their life. So some people, it's not just information, it's accessibility tools and STEM toys. They might buy a ton of Tangle toys for their autistic child and realize that they love playing with them too. Or after months of practicing really detailed and literal communication, they might clock what a relief doing so is for their brain. Similarly, moving to use more gender-neutral language or just kind of question sexist norms, stop making assumptions about what is inherently masculine or feminine, can help some closeted queer people escape the sexist prison they've been living in. Help the egg in your life to feel more happy and free. Sorry for the typo there. It should be just help. Only good things will follow, no matter where they land. As a fan of a person, you can't necessarily ask them to read a guide or watch a show about neurodiversity, but you could theoretically gift them a book, like Hassan Piker's friend, the now canceled Lolo, did with mine. But here, I think this clip illustrates the limitations of what we can do. So Lolo, on a stream, gave Piker a copy of Unmasking Autism after they had both done autism quizzes on the show. And it's all a big joke to them. It's just like, ho, ho, you're more autistic, I'm more autistic. Oh, I'm totally not autistic. And so it was interpreted as an insult. Piker is like jokingly insulted by the GIF and immediately turns it back on Lolo and says, well, you're the one who had the higher autism score, so you should read this book. So they're both trying to distance themselves from the label. So he probably just set it aside and never read it. Plus, we already know he's an ADHDer who streams for 19 hours a day. So for him, giving a book as a joke is probably not going to be the egg cracking trick, right? There are limitations, all I'm saying, is to our power of persuasion. And the resources you provide have to match the consumption habits and curiosity of the person you're approaching. All you can really do is provide a hungry mind with what they already crave. And then you gotta wait. Seb says, I love Fern Brady, but didn't realize she'd written a book. Definitely going to check that out. Yes. Oh, yeah. She's so great. She's lovely. And the book's really a really fun read. It really has personality, and it's really well written. And she has a novel coming out soon, too. Closet Demon, oh my god, Steph, is like the first time I learned trans was even a thing. And I was like, damn, I wish that was me, but I didn't think trans masks existed back then. Oh my goodness. Yeah, Steph's like, she has this beautiful kind of like fairy ethereal style that was very aspirational to me. And like ships passing in the night, sometimes a person's like early transition phase is kind of what you would like to look like coming from a different direction. And like I just loved her like white and purple hair and like makeup and like cool ethereal fashions and fairy like quality, and her transition was just so fun to watch, and like her videos were so great. And that was a very different landscape on YouTube when she was making those too, so it was so needed. And I had to find a very limited number of very femmy trans masks and gender fucky people to really see myself in, because the standard like trans mask narratives were not it for me. You know, the Anjola Ross cosplayers, people like that, the fairy boys, the people who get like nullification surgery and do like things that are beyond binary standard kind of binary cis assimilated options, all that stuff. Step 5, give them space. Today, many more public figures are identifying themselves as autistic openly, and with less of a lag between when they first explored the label and when they've publicly adopted it. Ginger Minge, Tina Burner, and Carrie Colby come to mind immediately for me as a Drag Race fan derogatory, who is pulling for several other queens to adopt an autistic label. Plain Jane, Katja, Trixie. Many newly out autistic public figures now say that learning of their disability was a relief because it explained so much of what they found difficult in life. And for the most part, these figures have been celebrated for making the choice to come out. Yeah, this is something that I learned about all of these people earlier this year. It's kind of one right after the other. And it really felt like a tide change. That like if a show, a very normie show for gay people who are not the most like politically left enlightened, reading a ton of theory and disability justice books, if they're all realizing that they're autistic and coming out as autistic. Something has shifted. It has radiated far beyond just the awkward people on TikTok to some of the divas, that this autism thing is happening, and the public image of autism is diversifying enough that people can see it in people who are glamorous and artistic, expressive, outgoing, socially skillful, great performers. That means something has changed, in people's understanding, which is great. But you can't force someone onto that path. Identifying publicly as a member of a highly stigmatized and politically disenfranchised minority group is still costly and dangerous, and plenty of media figures have good reason to never give that part of themselves to the public. When you come out as autistic, your behavior is more closely scrutinized, you are mocked, you might be denied work opportunities or labeled difficult, and even in the best of scenarios, you will be infantilized and asked to speak for an entire community when you don't have the authority to. Especially not when you are in a really shaky phase of learning your identity. That is not the time where you necessarily want to be the symbol or face the pressure to be a perfect symbol, or even a correct one. This is even more true, I think, for coming out publicly or queer or transitioning in the public eye. I have exposed all these fragile sides of myself to an international stage, albeit a much smaller one, and I would not recommend it, not any more than I would recommend the average person to come out as disabled at work. Here's my piece seeking an autism diagnosis. Here's why you might want to rethink that. Coming out is risky. It does not benefit your health to go through all this vulnerable work in public. It forces you to perform self-assurance when your understanding of yourself is at its most shaky and most subject to revision. When you are out in public, you are aware that everybody around you can see your softest spots and are judging you based on them and are looking for your tells. And if you wind up having to revise your identity or decide you got certain aspects of it wrong, you're going to be on this path dependence of sticking with the message you've already put out there, and shame can make it very difficult to go back on that too, and can make it feel like your life is at an end. It is terrible to become a symbol rather than a person. This is something that I read a lot in Unlearning Shame, that when you are marginalized, part of the damage of that is the constant scrutiny of representing your community, or your actions being interpreted not as you, but based on people's stereotypes of that community. My experience of being a public figure has been really minor on the grand scheme of things, but it's been harrowing enough that I do have immense sympathy for any remotely famous person whose life and identity are speculated about. Constant fan speculation about his sexual orientation and relationship made Dan Howell of Dan and Phil suicidal for a period of his career. And it got in the way of his relationship. It got in the way of Dan and Phil making videos, as they've now talked about. And it also led to them avoiding making close friends for the entire 16-year period that they were closeted about their relationship. Here's the Dan and Phil video that hit the towers recently and made many a fan, a PHAN fan, squeal with delight that, as many have RPF'd for years, these boys have been together since the day they met and made a video together. I don't go here, but I have been watching these videos, their little podcast. I love Dan. He's very Demon Prince coded. But yeah, even they still feel a need in these videos talking about how like ravaged their lives have been by fan invasiveness and like speculation and fear of exposure. They still feel the need to say, we love our fans. We have some of the best fans. They're so kind. Like we know most of them aren't like that. RPF is fine, and it's the only way to get into heaven. Like, and it's sad to me that like people are still so dependent on the parasocial bond to have their creative careers that they feel like they have to do that. Like because I think it just reinforces that sick kind of relationship where it's uneven. You have to like project like love and acceptance at your fans when they are people that you don't know, you know. So soapboxing there. So because of all these experiences, I don't think a human being's actual life should be sacrificed on the altar of positive representation. I think it ruins so many lives. Um, and if you don't have sympathy because it's like, oh, you're super rich and famous or whatever, I get that. But like, these people are workers. They are workers who are having to trade their privacy to be able to continue to keep doing their work. And I think we can leftistly have sympathy with that and see that that's a twisted, dark and twisted state of affairs. Even if it's like, yeah, whatever. Like, who cares about Grimes? She has children with a billionaire. I get it, but like, on a human level, harassing someone based on their identities that they are only exposing because they have to for their work is fucked up. And I believe that if you're really a fan of someone, if you really appreciate their work, you will honor that the majority of their humanity is something you can never know, and that it's best not to try. Art is what happens in the gaps of our understanding, and not everything is meant to be known. You can try and try and try to make yourself understood to an audience, but sometimes what's most compelling is that they never can know, or you never can know somebody else. Closet Demon says, maybe I'm just insane, but I swear they came out as a couple like 3 years ago. But I've been very confused by this. No, they came out as gay 3 years ago and said that they dated for a period of time. So they did confirm they were gay, and they did confirm that fan in that sense was real. But they made it sound like they had not been together for a long time. And so now they're coming out as being in a couple. But to go back to the parasocial piece, they are marketing a brand new podcast. That is part of why they're positioning it as a big deal and a big reveal, because they are now going to be talking about their relationship from all this time on their podcast. And they want views and subscribers and sponsors. And so they are positioning it as a big revelation. This stuff is business. This is people selling their personal lives for a profit. And so that is in the mix here, you know, like that is the knife that has cut them before. And that is also the knife now that they are wielding for their own ends. Like everything that you see online is a choice someone made, a presentational choice. So we are being manipulated by Dan and Phil. They are trading real vulnerability for views, and it's working. You know, like humans like vulnerability. Stories are powerful, and these incentives are here, whether you like it or not. It affects how we act. People are so weird with celebrities. Does anyone remember fans harassing Cavetown into outing himself as trans? Oh, I did not. I don't know Cavetown. Shit's fucked up. If you are hoping that your favorite streamer, comedian, drag queen, author, or other public figure will finally figure out that they're autistic, trans, gay, etc., I think the most effective and caring strategy is to honor their space. Try your best to want what is best for them, and accept that you don't know what that is. And you don't know them. We are the ones who change our own attitudes, not others. Decades of attitude and persuasion research have consistently shown this. And when our attitudes do change, they take a lot of time to do so. Shifting how you think means altering your organization of the world and your working theory of the facts about yourself that you have in your brain, as well as saying goodbye to your own prior notions of yourself. Whether you're an ardent superfan or a close loved one, you are never really in control of how another person thinks or feels. All that you can do is give them encouragement and useful tools and then trust them. Really trust them. to decide how to run their own life and whether it will ever be safe to change an identity publicly. We are living in an era of omnipresent surveillance and the demonization of autistic and trans people. When the pressure is immense to expose every single detail of our lives to a puritanical fascist state, true freedom is found in the shadows. Regardless of how we publicly label ourselves, we can work to create a more just world and be among one another in the dark. So, final note for the piece is just that what somebody says publicly about themselves or what they present or are out about is very different from what they know and feel privately and what they need from community. And so if it becomes difficult to help people get out of the closet or crack their egg because of the world that we're living in, where can you help them find that kind of safe, warm, dark, incubated privacy where they can be themselves? Because that is what matters. Vulnerability and exposure could be very risky things. So that is the piece. If you want me to answer a question about autism or sex, body autonomy, etc. stuff, you can send it to my Tumblr, askbox.drdevonprice.com/ask, or you can email me at askdevonprice@gmail.com. And link to a few related articles in the piece as well. That is the piece for you. Thank you, everybody, for being here. That one was a relatively quicker read. CNC. What about CNC? The 3 most beautiful letters in the English language. CNC. Any parting thoughts for us? Things that helped you come into an identity, things that have helped persuade people around you, or times when you've tried to... Oh shit, sorry, I was looking something up and didn't click Google. You're silly. Yeah, that one was short, all right. Only 3 hours. Only 4,800 words or something like that. Have fun in your search closet, demon. That's very funny. Were we talking about CNC at all? I don't think so. Which is rare. It was weird that we weren't. If anything. Oh, this is kind of a good comment from the comments I do want to share. Just about like the diversity of gender experiences. There's so many different ways to be trans, and sometimes I think when we're cracking eggs, we may project our transness narrative onto someone. Sometimes. So Rose Janot asks, what's the point of telling someone they're autistic or trans for that matter? What does anyone gain? You might feel kind of like defensive reading this, but hear them out. People find me, quote, obviously repressed trans, and I've become more comfortable with the label, but there are also many people who are just happy being femi, gays, and butchy dykes. One could argue we are inherently trans/non-binary, and I think I'd lean that way myself, but assuming clucky people simply have never heard of transness or autism is pre-post. So I am taking this comment in good faith because Rose is talking about herself, right? She's not saying, oh, why transition when you can just be a butch lesbian, right? Like she's saying, I am a butchy dyke. People think that screams trans man to them, and they try to kind of fit me into that narrative. I can agree that butch dykes are under the trans umbrella regardless, but don't push a label onto me that I haven't claimed, because this is also a gender variant label. And I think that's a fair criticism, or like, I think that's a fair point about especially the attitudes that we bring to people with identities that are more non-binary, that are more gender non-conforming, and things like that. That like telling someone they have to understand themselves in a more like binary direction is still a tough word, because that, like, what is a binary gender and where do you draw the line there? But like, how somebody can interpret their queerness is their own personal journey. Saying, I resonate with you, these are very queer experiences, I'm getting lots of queer signifiers for you, I think, a different and better tactic. So that's the point that Rose is making. And to answer their question of why do we tell people, what do we get out of telling people that they're trans or autistic? I answered, I think that many trans people have the experience of being unable to safely explore their identity and coping with immense denial, and they benefited from there being people in their lives who tried to help them push past those walls. And so they try to be the trans mentor that they wish they had, but sometimes we do project our past experiences onto another person, which can be pushy and invasive. And Rose says, I don't mind when people assume things in good faith, but with butches, people feel empowered to call us cis women, repressed trans, secretly a man, or whatever suits their rhetorical aim. I appreciate my trans friends so much, and if I do try hormones, I would probably use the trans label more liberally, but I have so many thoughts about gender. Most people don't really care what I think. They want to help you come to their conclusions. And I think that is an experience that butches have, and that people try to have one easy container for those experiences. Like, do you belong in lesbian spaces? Are you a lesbian even if you're on T? Like he, him, lesbian discourse. And it's not helpful to like try and divide these things or to equate masculinity with inherently being a man. Like that is not helpful to do when somebody is saying, this is my understanding of myself. And it's kind of a variety of things, because a lot of people, it's a yes and. It's like, some people are men and lesbians at the same time, and that's fine. Fuck around with it. Have fun. So I thought that was a nice comment that was appropriately nuanced. So I wanted to highlight that. All right, let's see what we got here in the chat as we wind down. Air Gender says, you also inspired me to Google CNC, but it's just showing the College of New Caledonia. Safe search off, my dears. Mavalent says, it's not the same thing, but tangentially related. Do you have thoughts about the dark mirror of autistic rapport? That is when two autistics hate each other. I have a lot of thoughts about that with regard to masking. That like sometimes one person's mask is really like oil and water with another person's mask. Or if you're unmasking and you are really committed to doing things that are stigmatized, being weird, being unrespectable, and you bump up against someone who is clinging to the mask and the made up social rules of it like it's their only like port in a storm, generally that masked person is going to be really hostile to you, because you are challenging everything about what they value, and everything they think they have to do is stuff you're not doing, and so it pisses them off. And it makes me feel unsafe, right? If I'm around somebody who's really fake as fuck masking, really fake nice, really artificial, like it freaks me out, because I don't know if they're going to kind of turn that same set of demands on me. And it's not always fair, because some people, they're just scared and they need time. But if I see somebody who's really hardcore turbo masking, I have a limited capacity to deal with that if they can't handle my unmasking. So that comes to mind for me. But also it's just like, incompatible accommodation needs sometimes makes two autistic people hate each other. Sometimes like people who remind me of me can piss me off because of my own shame, or because I want to be the pedantic one in the room. Like, we're human beings. We're immortal vampires. We're evil. We can be messy, and I love that. I love hating other autistic people. Like, it's so nice. It's such a luxury to get to have beef with other autistic people. We should talk about kink twice as much next time just to compensate. DJ on Dion says, giving people space and resources to explore themselves is such great advice. That's always what helped me the most. Yeah. Thanks for the hang, sis. Oh, anytime. Anytime, sis. Um, Melvalen says, I feel like that's come up for me a couple of times. People hate me for seemingly no reason, and I guess it might be that thing. Like perhaps they are autistic and don't want to admit. Yeah, absolutely. Uh, people, even in an autistic space, people are going to hate people they think are weird, awkward, uncomfortable, embarrassing, difficult. Like we still have those values. Like identity does not purify your value system. So, you know. And I talk about that in the book about my own prejudices against autistic people who were doing what I thought I could never do, and I had the power to not do and hide. And so I felt disgusted, but also fascinated by autistic people who were violating those social rules at that time. You know, when I was a shitty teenager. You know, but it like we all have the capacity to do that stuff. Kiwi Vogel says, me and my equally autistic younger sibling did not get along for a very long time. We good now, though. That's good. Night Owl says, have relationships like that and have stuck it out, softening, giving space, and listening to their trauma. Sometimes over time they come around that they too can drop their mask a bit. That's great. Or relax their mask a bit. That's a lot of work, but it is a great kindness and generosity of your energy and time if you can do it. So that's lovely. All right. I think that is it for today on the Stram. There's a game I'm thinking about streaming soon. Since last week's stream was so fun of No, I'm Not a Human. Let me see what's on my wish list. It's another like horror game. So I might there's a possibility that I'll do a gaming stream. Oh no, it's not out yet. Fuck. Last Look Along Woodward Boulevard. By the team that made Who's Lila, but it's not out yet. Never mind. Yeah, so we'll probably be off next week. Next week I'll have a article on things I've been noticing. 4 months off testosterone drop. A whole big long list of fun things. Periods, orgasm changes, people being sexist to me again, people being weirdly asking my ethnicity a lot. All kinds of weird new things are happening with just like a very moderate change in presentation. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about what changes, what stays the same, and what becomes something new in my experience as someone who was on testosterone for years, not right now. Who knows? You know what? Who knows what? Who knows who I am? Who knows what the world holds? So we'll have an article about that, and then I'll have a fun article that someone asked a question that inspired about ethical ghosting and what to do if somebody that you're talking to messages a lot more than you message, or you just have a big difference in how you like use messaging apps. So I've written a whole theory, a whole taxonomy for that. So that's coming up soon on the Substack too. Melbourne for Everybody says, so grateful for these and your descriptions as a visually impaired person. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be doing these videos and like hearing from blind people and visually impaired people that it makes it more accessible to them. It's so nice, and it's a whole area that I was not putting energy into making space for before. Like I did not used to even be good about having alt text on my pieces because I have issues with having the patience to do everything in a detail-oriented way, and that came at the cost of what was accessible for me meant the work wasn't accessible to a lot of other people. And the videos are a way to really lock me in and socially and mentally engage me and make something that is transformative and reach people who can't read the article or see the images. So thank you so much for being here, Melbourne for Everybody. I really am so glad to like be meeting new people through the YouTube. Waluigi and Bowser said, yeah, I do like the comment Rose made. That was the comment I made about me not being trans, but just a gender nonconforming guy. Yeah, you know, like what feels like home for you is your business. And I think sometimes we do discount other options, especially if we see our own repressed self in somebody else. And that's one of the limits of empathy, that we don't actually know. So, talking about Hades in the chat. Yeah, having it be like a performative, like a social thing, recording the videos just keeps me doing it. And it's like this has just been such a fun addition to my like creative process and work flow, and it's like teaching but without any of the parts of teaching that aren't fun. So thanks everybody for being here. Again, feel free to submit any article ideas to my email or my Tumblr. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out. Join the Piscord if you have not been on the Piscord and you like what the chatters have to say and want to hang out with them. It's full of disabled and trans people and other various and sundry freaks doing all kinds of fun stuff together. So I'll put a link to the Piscord in the chat too. And it's very as non-hierarchical as I can make it be. I don't really run that show for the most part. All right, thank you so much everybody for being here. And now is the time where I would raid if I had a rating option like on Twitch, but I'm just gonna leave you for now. Thanks for watching. Have a